These miraculous beasts are capable of shaking the entire earth and feel absolutely no guilt for the destruction of small, innocent animals. Yet they are noble creatures who radiate kindness to the earth, granting it prosperity. However, it was not always so. 100 years ago, the previous king, Tiger Colossus, attempted to mass-produce such fantastic animals, which later led to the death of many of them, and even to the point that most of them abandoned their status as saints, surrendering the powers of the earth and turning into ordinary people just to survive. And now, out of thousands of magical animals, Lionel Milliard is the only one left to live on Earth. The children surrounded the handsome man, asking him if he could really turn into a tiger. It was obvious to them, but they wanted to see. So this handsome boy is Lionel, the last of the fantastic animals. He pleased his pride by being loved by everyone, and yes, he could turn into a tiger. The boys begged him to show them his transformation magic, thereby raising his narcissism as a magical tiger who loved attention. He joked to the boys that it was his secret weapon and refused to show it. People were crazy about the handsome and funny Lionel, but there was one girl who didn't share Lionel's enthusiasm. She just wondered how he could be so popular. But her friend was stunned by the mountain of muscles of that handsome man. She even wiped her drool when she looked at him. She enthusiastically told Hannah how handsome he was, calling her boyfriend an old pumpkin compared to Lionel. Hannah interrupted her, saying that it was not nice to talk about men like that. Amelia just nodded her head angrily, telling Hannah that Amory wasn't her boyfriend, so it was okay and she could call him names. Hannah laughed and told Amelia that if he wasn't her boyfriend, she wouldn't be interested in hearing the gossip that was being discussed in the town this morning. And she was interested? Just look at him! Someone was saying that Amorea had bought a large bouquet of flowers this morning to ask Amelia out, which she couldn't believe with happiness. But Hannah reminded her that she had promised to help her aunt clean the stables tonight, so the date would have to be canceled. And then they agreed that Hannah would do it for her, so that she would go on a date, and in return, she would obey her all day tomorrow. Now they were both satisfied, especially Amelia, who was already thinking about what to wear. After all, a real guy is better than a narcissistic tiger, right? Hannah went into the kitchen to her aunt to give her the dirty dishes, and she said that she must love Amelia very much if she was covering her from work. The aunt poured a bowl of soup and asked the girl to take it to the guest, the blonde, handsome man sitting in the hall of their cafe. The girl agreed. She brought the guest a plate of soup, politely greeting him, and he just glanced at her, looking her up and down. He smiled and changed his gaze to a more seductive one, asking if she worked here. As if it wasn't obvious anyway, Lionel was flirting. She remained silent, only glancing at the guest to see what he needed. He asked her for a small favor, taking a gold coin from his pocket. Hannah took it, and of course checked to see if it was real. There are all kinds of guests. Trust, but verify. She agreed to listen to him. They didn't have any more guests anyway. You look at him sternly. And that made him laugh, so he said that he was already starting to like her. The request was that he was looking for someone with whom he could go on a 2-month journey. He began to list what this person should be like. She thought about it because his requirements are high, and it's not so easy to find such a person, so she advised him to just hire someone he wouldn't mind trusting. Since this was not an answer and did not satisfy him, he silently raised his hand, indicating that she could go with him. But the idea didn't satisfy her anymore, so she threw the coin back at him. He clearly didn't expect this, because every woman was ready to go anywhere with him. Hannah just sternly replied that she couldn't agree to something she wasn't sure about. She wanted to leave, but it seemed like he was really starting to like her. He laughed that she had such a thing, and she couldn't leave. She didn't look him in the eye and lied that she was busy. And he said that there were no guests, and therefore there was no business either. Hannah replied that she didn't say that, and that she had a lot of things to do. This made him laugh even more, and he asked her to at least change her facial expression when she was lying. She exhaled and turned away, and when he laughed, it was even more beautiful. It even seemed like her heart was beating faster. But she still refused. Wishing him a good day and that he would find the right person, she turned and left. He watched her go and only said that it was a pity to hear her refuse. It was evening, it was getting dark quickly outside, and she was already tired from working in the cafe and cleaning up after the horses. But she loved horses and loved talking to them. It seems they were happy to see her too, because while she was talking, the horses heard something strange. The girl moved away from the horses, as frightened as they were. Something was disturbing them, because they began to kick down the door with their hooves, and within a minute, one of them had even kicked the door open and ran out. He was so scared that he almost hit Hannah when he jumped out. She got scared and started calling the horse Dorothea, wanting her to come back, but he ran as fast as he could towards the forest. The girl fell to her knees and realized that she would be in big trouble if she did not return the horse to the stable. She walked through the forest and called the horse by name, hoping that he would hear and return, or at least make some sound. But at one point, she fell silent, seeing something she shouldn't have. The fear in her head paralyzed her whole body so that she couldn't escape. In front of her stood a huge tiger, which came out of the bushes at her scream. He looked straight into her soul, but did not bother her and left. She fell to her knees, barely saying how glad she was that he was gone. But her body was still frightened by just one look at him. Then she remembered that there could only be one tiger who hadn't attacked her, Lionel. If that was the case, then there was nothing to be afraid of because normal tigers couldn't be that big. She sat alone in the middle of the dark forest, reassuring herself that it was indeed Mr. Lionel. At least, she hoped that he would protect her. But when she saw him during the day, he was still a human. And now he has transformed into a tiger, because it seems more comfortable for him to be in this form. After calming down a bit, she looked around, noticing the clothes next to her and no one else. And she seemed to recognize that they were Lionel's clothes that he had worn in the cafe. Remembering his words that the tiger was his weapon, why did he need this weapon now, and what if something terrible had happened and he had transformed? She started shouting his name towards the forest, hoping he would hear her. She called out to him, asking if something was wrong. Then she decided she would follow him. Suddenly, the same tiger jumped out of the bushes, and when she heard his growl, she was scared. But it seemed to her that he was trying to say something. She wanted to get up and accidentally touched one of Lionel's things with her hand, a gold medallion with a stone. And at that moment, something shone from the side, so brightly that it blinded them both. The golden medallion released some powerful magic from itself, thus releasing the chains and a bright beam of light. The girl felt something strange touch her hand. She came to and opened her eyes, only quietly asking what had just happened. Above her stood a man, a silver collar with strange patterns shining around his neck, and a chain extending from the collar to the ground. And from the ground, a chain was chained to her hand. While she lay motionless, trying to see what was above her, the big tiger was gone, and in its place stood a handsome, naked man above her. Lionel had turned back into a human and seemed angry. She tried to soften the situation and, smiling, asked if she had really just made the biggest mistake of her life. He was very angry and agreed with her that this was not what he wanted, and it was good that she understood that she had made a big mistake by coming here. She wanted to ask more about what happened, but he said he wanted to get dressed first. She turned away, realizing that his muscles were exposed. What she touched was an ancient artifact, a magical object that had been created by the royal family, and all in order to catch fantastic animals and control them and give orders. Then Hannah asked why she was tied to this and couldn't even touch these chains, as if they were invisible, and how to get rid of them. Lionel replied that she was now the second person after him to touch this relic, which could only mean one thing. Now she is his mistress. He told her that he was looking for a person, and that was because he hoped to find someone with whom he could reach the magical place where the relics were sealed. He wanted to break this spell and restore order to the artifacts. He had been preparing for this journey for a long time, and now everything had changed. She told him to find someone he could trust, and it so happened that fate brought them together to go through this ordeal. He smiled and said that a formal relationship was still better than a casual acquaintance. But if that's the case, he wanted to at least know her name. She replied that her name was Hannah, and she already knew his name. He placed his hand on his chest and, kneeling on one knee, he asked her to accompany him on a journey to Lightning Rhodium, the city of artifacts. This was clearly not how she had planned for the next few months, but she couldn't refuse either because it was her fault it happened. But she had to blow it. He promised her that he would provide the girl with clothes, food, and shelter, and that when she sealed the relic, they would return to the village together, and he would give her money for it. He also warned her that he didn't care what she did with his body, as long as she didn't misuse his power. She looked at him awkwardly, asking what could be done with his body, not understanding the meaning of his words. And he smiled again and said that now that she had captured Lionel Miliod, he would serve her by fulfilling all her wishes. She looked down and thought only of one thing, hoping that he would at least help her clean the stable and find the horse. He smiled sweetly, watching the girl frown, and asked if she didn't like spending time with him. Hannah, wanting to seize the moment, asked Lionel to find a mare that had escaped from the stable. She was very important to the owner. He raised his head and listened to the silence of the forest and smelled the horse. He assured Hannah that she had not run far, and they set off. Hannah also asked him to talk about everything that happened later, because she still had a lot to learn. But first, they had to find the horse, and he agreed. As soon as she took a few steps, she saw that her hand stopped glowing. When she raised her hand, she saw that the chain was gone, So the spell must have been gone too? Lionel assured her that they were still chained together, and the chain had disappeared for their own convenience. Yet she was sure she would get tired of constantly seeing the shackles on her hands. The man said that Dorothy the mare wouldn't like it if he came any closer to her because he was guilty of something. He was passing by the stables when Hannah was cleaning there, and the horses smelled the beast and got scared, which is why one of them ran away. He smiled again when he saw that the girl was angry, because she had gone into the forest precisely because of the horse, and that is why they were now bound by chains. They stopped, and he reminded the girl that she could make him do anything she wanted, as long as she ordered him. Hannah thought for a moment and looked at him again, wondering if he would die if she told him to, if he said anything. His eyes lit up with fire, and he replied that he didn't even know, asking her if she wanted to try, to check. She rejected the idea. She was just curious how far he would go for her. But he warned her that in the future, she had better be careful with her words, because they have consequences. She raised her head again and looked at him. It seemed he wasn't as selfish as she had thought before, even kind. They decided that they would go in search of that holy place tomorrow, because the night had been long and it would be worth resting. Finally, they reached the middle of the forest and found her lost horse. Hannah was glad to see her again, and he stood still so as not to scare the horse. Then, he was even glad that when she could do anything with him, she had decided to only use him to find one horse, and he wouldn't have had to kill her if she had turned out to be some terrible person. The next morning, she was already getting ready to leave. She had packed a bag of clothes and groceries and was waiting for him. She heard a voice behind her. He asked if she wasn't going to say goodbye to her aunt and Amelia, to which she said she planned to come back. He asked her if she would be able to endure the journey to the capital on foot, without a horse, because they wouldn't get there soon. He was grateful to her for her help, and even under these circumstances, she agreed to go so far with him, even though he was a stranger to her. She angrily told him that she wouldn't be able to thank him for the bread, so he smiled and promised to pay her when they reached the capital. That would be fair. As soon as they got out, she asked him how long they would have to walk. He said about 2 months, but it depended on whether she could walk for a long time every day. She looked at him with an angry look, wondering who he thought she was. She wasn't some weakling and thought she could handle anything. She asked why they had so few things. She thought they needed more for the trip. But he objected because he planned to hunt animals during the trip. He asked her if she would eat meat, and she said of course she would, especially since it was made for hunting, which made him laugh a lot. And she also noticed that they didn't take anything to sleep on at night, not a single comfortable bed. But he cheerfully said that he had his own idea. He turned his head to her and asked flirtatiously, "There's nothing warmer than tiger fur, right?" Not understanding his intentions, she asked if he was suggesting she peel his skin off. Did he regenerate? He meant that he would turn into a tiger and they would sleep together. But it seems he has now changed his mind and will try to find a sleeping bag in the city. When it got dark, they stopped in the forest and built a fire. The man asked if her legs hurt, but it was the first day she was still holding on. Finally, he finished cooking a large piece of meat, which she was very happy about, because she loved to eat. He stared at her, still with some mistrust, since she was controlling his power and they were still barely acquainted. And she, while lovingly chewing her meat, noticed his gaze, and it seemed she had something to say. Vuna stopped eating, and, after thinking for a moment about how to say it, asked if he could turn into a tiger. At that moment, she seemed especially cute to him. He seemed glad that everything had happened that way. Smiling, he said that she could try to order him with the help of the relic, rather than asking him to do something. She refused, and when he asked why, she said she didn't like it. She wasn't his mistress. Having emphasized once again that he would not order him around, they sat looking at each other, warming themselves by the warm fire. She continued to eat, and he stared at her with his animal eyes for a long time, these words meaning something to him. Hannah's face was smeared, but she praised his cooking skills and asked if he wanted to try a piece. He happily said that he was glad to hear that, but refused to eat, left everything for her, and wiped her face. They continued to sit together. She ate, and he admired her. In his mind, he truly understood that he had found a good companion. The next morning, they set out on a long journey, which was very difficult, and not everyone would have crossed it. At first, they walked along rivers, and only then did they climb into the mountains, and so on until evening, until they came to a wooden house where they decided to stop for the night. She fell to the floor and said she was very tired. He praised her, saying that she had not gone through an easy path and had tried. He suggested that she rest while he went hunting. She remarked that if he did not take the spear, he would hunt as a tiger. Lionel asked if she wanted to watch him take off his shirt and turn into a tiger, because she was so curious. She instantly turned away, covering him with her hands and screaming why he had started undressing without even warning. He laughed at her while she was embarrassed, and asked how he could turn into a tiger. If he didn't take off his clothes, he would tear them, and they didn't take any more things. She was resting when she heard the tiger roar and looked up at him, but he tricked her into seeing his muscles. While he was telling her about his hunting, she admired his perfect form, so much so that her mouth started to drool. Wow! He noticed her gaze and asked if she was really admiring him now, if that was really the proper thing to do. She was not embarrassed and confidently replied that he was handsome and she wanted to admire him up close. But how close? They both laughed, and he said that she better not provoke his animalistic instincts, to which she agreed that she wouldn't do it again. She said she would be careful now, but he said he should be careful because she wouldn't be able to stop him anymore. Hannah became curious and asked if she could stop him with the help of the relic. Of course, Lionel suggested she try it, because he's not sure that the relic will defeat him, and then Hannah could be in danger if he doesn't control himself. She got angry because now he was contradicting himself. After all, he had said yesterday that she could order him around. He agreed that the relic was strong because it was created by kings. But whether it would be enough to restrain the tiger, Hannah herself did not understand whether it would restrain him. He said that this relic was created a long time ago, when other sacred animals existed, and it is not known whether it still works after so many years. He watched her reaction after those words, but it seemed she wasn't even scared that she might be in danger. Lionel offered to cook her dinner, and she agreed to help, and they decided that this was truly the best working relationship. Then her husband reminded her that she had to get up early tomorrow, so it wouldn't hurt to get a good night's sleep and get ready. She nodded. Before she could understand what had just happened, she felt something very, very large standing behind her. He called her name, and she just asked in fear if he had just turned into a tiger, and she could look at him. Turning around, she saw a very large cat with big teeth, thick, fluffy fur, and sharp claws. She stared at him for a long time with her mouth open and didn't know what to say, because she had asked him so many times to transform, and now he was a tiger. He smiled and asked if she was scared. At least he expected that reaction because he was a big and angry tiger, very dangerous. But the girl squealed loudly with happiness at seeing such a cute cat. All the while she just wanted to pet him. She shouted loudly, "What a cute cat he is!" He frowned and asked, "Who else is a cat?" Before she could say anything else, she touched him from all sides and asked him not to turn into a human when he was such a cute cat. She screamed that she would just die from his cute look. He himself asked her to calm down or just scream with joy. "Then she will scream with joy," Hannah replied, and continued to hug him and say what a cute cat he is. He just lay there angrily, thinking about how long the evening would be if she couldn't admire his cute face and soft fur. Then he decided it was time to calm her down and caught Hannah by the tail, wrapped it around her waist, and pulled her to him. She barely managed to say his name when she found herself face down in his soft fur. She buried her face in it and enjoyed the moment. She stroked his long fur and said that it felt as if he was warmer than fire and so soft. Lionel asked if she wasn't afraid of him at all. She laughed and asked if he was planning to eat her later. She wanted to hug him more, but made the mistake of calling him a little kitten. He pushed her with his paw. After all, he is an angry tiger, I guess. Tiger asked if she understood that touching his stomach was the same as touching Lionel in human form. She somehow didn't think about it. She even felt ashamed and smiled and said that it sounded very indecent. He realized that she didn't think about it, but she didn't want to leave him either. It seemed like everything was going well for her, but it wouldn't last long. Oh, something went wrong, and he decided to teach her a lesson by turning into a human and having her lie on his body. He reminded her that this was very inappropriate. The next morning, they woke up together. She slept on his fur, and it seemed like she was really starting to like it. And it was warm. The tiger asked her if she had slept well, for which she thanked him, for she had slept so soundly as a baby. Lionel offered her to touch his tail, but she refused, and he reminded her that yesterday she hadn't refused, and she even liked touching it. She decided to run away from him and his jokes, and he just laughed, thinking that yesterday's warning had worked very well. Hannah called her husband to the table. She prepared soup for them, but wasn't sure what he would eat, because there were vegetables, and he was a tiger. But he was very grateful to her for her concern, and sat down at the table to eat soup. But one thought haunted him, and he asked the girl why she still perceived him as an ordinary animal, giving her time to think about this question. Then she had a question. She clarified that it was an indecent question, and of course he was interested. It was indeed a good question, whether a child could be born to a human and a fantastic creature. He explained to her that a child might be born, but it was impossible to guess who it would be, because it could be either a human, an animal, or a sacred being. Then he wondered why she was asking him that. She clarified that it was only interesting from a scientific point of view. Although they are rare, there have been cases when people married fantastical beasts despite the difference in life expectancy. Lionel said that he didn't care why she asked, but now he had an indecent question, and he asked if she had a boyfriend. This was really something no one expected. More interesting is the purpose of his question. She lowered her head and replied that she had neither a boyfriend nor a fiancé. He continued eating his soup and said that was how he knew. Hannah didn't expect him to ask her about it because she was sure he wasn't interested in gossip or anything like that. She looked at him, waiting for an answer, and he made a serious face and asked why she was asking him such strange questions. She just said, "What?" And he gave that seductive look again and said, "Why are you asking about whether we're going to have a child? This is more unexpected." She got angry, arguing with him that she hadn't said such a thing and wouldn't even think of it. He laughed, perhaps not saying it as directly as she would have liked, making her even more nervous. Hannah sat angrily, reminding him that he was already an adult and was behaving like a child, and he covered her mouth with soup because it was very tasty. They set off again, walking for several hot hours, and she was already tired. She could barely walk because it seemed like she had calluses on her feet, and it was getting harder and harder to continue the journey. He began to worry about her and asked if she would be able to reach the next resting place so they could rest and then continue walking. She started to get nervous because the road was still long and she was ruining the trip. Of course, he said it was normal to complain when things were difficult, but she didn't agree. He thought she would cry, but no, she was strong and still holding on. He asked her to warn him if she got sick and he could carry her in his arms. It was already evening and they came to a cave where they decided to stop. Her legs hurt a lot, but he praised her so that she wouldn't worry. He saw that her shoes were very bad and assured her that he would buy her better shoes in the next village. And now he would apply medicinal herbs to her. He took the plant and started chewing it, making a concoction that would heal her wounds. She didn't seem to like the idea very much. Lionel spat out the green mixture and advised her not to argue and to give him her leg so he could help her. She gave her leg, and he began massaging the wounds with magic herbs. It seems it's not as terrible as it seemed at first. Hannah laughed that he was treating her with grass that a tiger had just chewed, and the man was angry that she treated him like an ordinary animal. When Lionel finished, she immediately tried to move away from him, looking at him with a judgmental look. And at that moment, the man took her leg and began to lift her pants above the knee, which alarmed her. And it's a good thing she didn't refuse, because he gave her the best foot massage. His hands are really strong and sturdy. She jokingly asked if he had thought about opening a massage parlor with such skills, but he refused because he was more interested in working as a mercenary. While he was busy massaging her feet, she looked into his face and noticed something. She noticed that he was constantly trying to get closer to her, and every time he got closer to her. But Hannah believed that they would not become closer unless she gave in to temptation, and it was better to consider his kindness as payment for her help. At that moment, she decided to ask him if Lionel really wanted to serve her. He pulled her leg closer to his body and said that he didn't want to serve her, but if that was what she really wanted, he agreed. She couldn't stand the glare from his sweet face, trying to shield herself from the onslaught of his beauty. Hannah threw a sleeping bag at him and asked him to finish it, but he said that even if he dared to do it, people would still be happy. She did realize that they should have drawn a line between their relationship from the very beginning, and now she just wants to sleep. In the morning, they continued their journey and talked about the relic, and that it was precisely such relics that were kept by the elves in the kingdom. Not only were the elves able to help them, but they were the only ones who actually used magic properly, so they went to them even though he didn't like it. He remembered one of the elves he trusted and would allow to seal the relic, Azekale Scott, who was the prime minister. Since it's a relic with very strong magic, they need the strongest elf. But Hannah was more interested in the relationship between elves and animals. Lionel mentioned that they used to have a lot of wars over territory, but they signed a treaty, and now there are none. The man smiled, not having talked so much about the old days in a long time. And with the soldiers, they only talked about work. Hannah praised her husband for his wonderful storytelling skills, which made her more interested in going. In reality, he was only telling her all this to distract Hannah from the pain in her legs, and he also finally understood why she was uncomfortable before. This is because she had no feelings for him, although usually the girls were delighted with him and showed interest themselves. He remembered that the girl was most emotional when he turned into a tiger, and only because he looked like a cat. It was the first time Lionel had met a woman who was so cold to him, she even told him that for the money he was paying, he wouldn't be able to win her heart. This selfish attitude of hers worried him, so new questions arose for her. He dared to ask the girl why she still didn't have a boyfriend or fiancé. She replied that she didn't know, and it wasn't because she didn't want a relationship. She would like to meet a man she will love, someone she will be with in joy and sorrow, but she hasn't met him yet. He smiled and asked what the problem was then. If she wanted to meet such a man, then let her meet him. Otherwise, she wouldn't know if it was the same one. And he hinted to her that maybe she had some problems with men, which made her laugh a lot, but she didn't want to talk about it. To continue the conversation, Lionel also complained that he couldn't find a girlfriend. It was difficult. Hannah noticed that it was because humans and animals have different lifespans, And that was also one of the reasons. It was difficult for him because he couldn't know if this woman was with him because she loved him or just to possess him and his power. Hannah felt sorry for him, saying that she never thought that beautiful people could also have problems with love. Lionel was really surprised that she thought he was handsome. He didn't think she was looking at his face. So that he wouldn't be arrogant, she warned him that he wasn't to her taste, and that there were people in the world more beautiful than him. Lionel laughed out loud and agreed with her, but she quickly shut him up, telling him not to comment on her words. Hannah said again that she just had different tastes in men, but for her, Lionel really went beyond beauty, which made him very happy. And she also joked that if a law were passed and every family had at least one Lionel, then there would be peace in the world. Lionel objected, saying he was already busy with her. She smiled and admitted that she was very comfortable with him, although he didn't understand what she was talking about. Hannah remembered that they had talked about uncomfortable topics many times, and she liked both talking and being silent with him. Only now did she notice that, while they were walking and talking, all the strength she had left her body. They really opened up to each other, talking about personal topics, and it meant something to both of them. Hannah said that Lionel talks a lot and quickly, exactly the perfect type of man for her friend Amelia. He suggested that they both pester each other with various nonsense, and she agreed. The man said that people get tired of talking too quickly, but he wouldn't care if she didn't even listen to him. Hannah said words that made him think, because it seemed like she really didn't demand understanding from other beings. This stopped him, and he thought for a long time. She turned around and noticed that he was looking at her intently and asked what had happened to him. He smiled and waved his hand, saying that nothing happened. He was just minding his own business. Then she understood what was the matter. He lives in the human world, being the last of his holy family. No one will ever be able to understand him because he has been left alone to wander this holiday for thousands of years. He has lived among people for too long and has seen people born, live, and die, and he will never be able to be like them. She had no right to approach his loneliness. But now she could only sympathize with him, so she put her hand on his shoulder. He asked her what that just meant, but she couldn't tell the truth, so she lied and said he had cool muscles and she wanted to touch them. He smiled and said that he also had the eyes to see it. Although it was not much comfort, she wanted to support him in some way. Finally, they reached the village, which meant that a soft bed, a warm bath, delicious food, and lots of shopping awaited them. She joked that she would finally be able to sleep in a bed without insects. He smiled and asked why she was silent if it was so bad. When they entered the hotel, an old woman greeted them but could not comfort them because there was only one free room left. Hannah was furious because she didn't want to share a bed with her husband, and the woman insisted that there were no other options. Lionel reminded the girl that her legs hurt and they couldn't go any further, so they should take one room, but she angrily shut him up. She thought about the fact that the woman was lying, because logically, it wouldn't be profitable for her to give away a single room, and the one they were offered was very expensive. Therefore, Hannah realized that now there would be a reason for a quarrel with her husband, but still told him that if there were no rooms, then it was better to look for another hotel. And then the woman suddenly remembered that they had another free room for one person, and agreed to show it to them as long as they didn't go to another hotel. Lionel was amazed at her intelligence. She was cooler than he thought. And she was proud of herself and the fact that she would sleep separately from him. As they followed the woman up the stairs to the room, he asked if he was really so disgusting to her that she asked for a separate room. He wanted one room for safety so that no one would hurt her. But she assured him that no one would dare touch her, knowing that Lionel was protecting her. The man assured her that she didn't know people well and that they were much stupider than she thought and could attack her for the purpose of blackmail. And when they went up to the second floor, he said that now he knew that she wouldn't mind sleeping in the same room because that's how she felt, but she would just be embarrassed, and that's why Hannah hit him. He suggested that she go rest, while he would go shopping and buy her shoes and everything she needed. She was very grateful and asked to take care of her clothes, and she would go to the bedroom and get some sleep. While she was unpacking her things in the bedroom, an old woman entered the room, wanting to apologize for the awkward situation that morning. Hannah assured me that everything was okay and agreed to go to a delicious dinner that the woman offered at the hotel's expense. The woman also asked if Lionel was Hannah's companion and they were traveling together. The girl replied that he was. The woman laughed because she said she thought they were a couple and asked if they had changed their minds and didn't want a shared number. That would help. At this time, Lionel was shopping, first going to choose shoes for Hannah, accompanied by fans. Wherever he went, he was accompanied by people who were delighted with his strength. He had almost finished all the chores. He still needed to buy groceries because Hannah loves to eat delicious food. As he was about to leave, he was stopped by a strange man who shouted his name and asked who the woman he was traveling with was. He is popular only because he is a holy being, and therefore people are very interested in his personal life and that strange woman. The guy asked why Lionel came to their city with that woman. To the man, these were meaningless questions from stupid people. People around asked hundreds of questions and invited the cute couple to visit them, and many times asked him to show them how he transformed into a tiger. He was so tired of answering those stupid questions from stupid people. The only person he liked right now was Hannah. And it was because of her indifference to him that he could not accept other people besides her. It seems like he spent too much time shopping, and it's time to get back to her. He seems really bored. He entered her bedroom, announcing that he had returned with packages. She had just gotten out of the shower and was happy to see him. He stared at her intently without taking his eyes off her and asked if she wanted to try on the clothes he had bought. Lionel blushed. Hannah asked what the problem was and invited him into the room, but he had problems. Knowing Hannah, nothing should go beyond the bounds so as not to ruin their relationship. So he calmly handed her the bags of clothes. Hannah was happy about her new shoes and was afraid to say anything too much so as not to quarrel with him, while he tried to think about sad things so as not to get upset by her. The man invited her to dinner with him, but Hannah said she couldn't because she had just applied healing ointment to her wounds. Lionel said if so, then he would have to pick her up and take her to dinner. Hannah heard voices outside the window and, looking in, saw a crowd of people waiting for her husband. She said that he was very popular. The handsome man offered to bring dinner to the room if she didn't want to see this crowd of people and listen to stupid questions. "Don't you just want to be in my arms?" he asked, very insistently. She faced a very difficult choice. Whether to eat or not, it seemed there was no option that would definitely suit her. Just as he was about to say something else, she stretched out her arms and asked him to take her in his arms. He took her in his arms and said that now they would make a sensation. Hannah laughed and remembered that she had not yet told him what had happened earlier. She said that when he was not there, the hotel owner would come into the room and be very interested in their relationship. He apologized for the inconvenience, but she interrupted him, saying that everything was okay with them, but other people were wrong to pry into their personal lives. He was very curious about what she had said to the owner about their relationship, but she assured him that there was nothing between them. Unfortunately, he thought. He agreed that, indeed, other people's curiosity should not concern them. People with chocolate were looking at them, talking about the fact that he was carrying her in his arms, while they were just enjoying the delicious chicken. Their journey continued the next day. It was sunny and not too hot to continue walking. Hannah was grateful for the very comfortable shoes, but there was one problem, a very big one, and she was curious about what he wanted. Lionel began to behave very strangely, which made her very nervous. She didn't know how to behave around him. He looked at her all day and licked his lips, even though he said he wasn't hungry. She smiled as she straightened her hair and asked if there was something on her face that he was looking at so intently. The man calmly replied that no, there was nothing, and didn't understand why she was asking, and she was annoyed that he was constantly looking at her. She didn't even know how to eat, and she really loves to eat, but his gaze annoyed her. She barely managed to say that the choop was very tasty, but she still felt uneasy from his animalistic gaze. His beastly eyes seemed to be looking at prey, as if he was already preparing to pounce on it. Only now did she realize that she was starting to be a little afraid of Lionel, of him and that look, especially when he licks his lips while looking at her. She dared to ask Lionel what had happened during their trip. He turned his head and replied that nothing had happened. An uncomfortable atmosphere hung over them. She also asked if he was in a bad mood and why. She didn't want to sit with him in silence. She had just said it was time to finish eating and go to bed when a giant, fluffy cat stood above her in a second. She shouted in shock if this was his maximum size, and he very calmly replied that no, it could be more. Hannah lay down on the tiger and admired the stars, hoping that he wouldn't suffocate her with his size, and at least not eat her, because now she was like prey. The tiger called her by name and asked her to move closer to him. It seemed he felt the tension between them. She was trembling and begged the magical creature not to eat her, but he just licked her, which she definitely didn't expect. She stood before him, looking out of only one eye, her face half licked, and it seemed to him that he had finally realized what he had done. He said that this was all the nature of a tiger, and it seemed he would regret what he had done. She instantly ran away from the tiger with loud screams. Lionel just silently watched what he had done. Hannah hid behind a tree, listening to him apologize and tell her that he didn't mean for it to happen. It all happened by accident. She didn't believe him and was very, very angry, saying that she would only come back after washing in the river. She returned, but warned that she would not tolerate such behavior again. The tiger shrank in size and ordered her to pack her things. The tiger came closer to her, saying that he had an idea how they could continue their journey. Special measures were needed, and here she is again with him. Special measures, he said? It seems like they are really special. I forgot to specify that she was tied to his body, and he was running at the speed of light to the nearest village to make a stop. She screamed so loudly, even after they stopped. She had never experienced anything like this before. Hannah sat in silence for a long time. She needed a lot of time to breathe while he lay calmly looking at her. The tiger got up and was about to walk towards the forest, but before that, he ordered the girl to take their things and go to the village and find a place where they could spend the night. She started fighting with him because she set a condition that he go with her or she would go with him because she thought he would get into a fight with someone again. He refused her, but Hannah was stubborn and said she would go with him no matter what. Lionel didn't want to resort to such consequences, but there was no other way to send her to the village, so he took her in his teeth and carried her to the village. He left right in front of the hotel, and while she argued for a long time, he remained silent, not wanting to argue with her. Hannah asked him to stop, to wait for her, but he quickly disappeared into the darkness, so she had no other options but to go to the hotel. She continued to sit alone with her bags, realizing that he had really left her and gone into the forest, and even starting to worry. The girl stood at the entrance of the hotel and wondered why he had invited her to travel if he was planning to disappear like that without saying anything. She was still thinking about him, and what if he got hurt or something happened? But fatigue took its toll and she fell asleep. After a few hours of sleep, she felt something or someone nearby and opened her eyes to see a man sitting across from her. She got out of bed and said his name, and he smiled, complimenting her on her very good hearing. Noticing that even the elves don't notice when he quietly sneaks up on them, she heard him right away. Hannah was worried if he was hurt and if everything was okay, but he assured her that he hadn't fought, so everything was okay. If he wasn't fighting, where was he? Hannah asked. He was afraid to tell the truth because he didn't know if she would understand him, and it might be better to lie that he was out for a walk. He reminded her that because of his magical power, unlike humans, he has a highly developed sexual instinct, so sometimes he needs to go for a walk. She asked if she understood correctly that according to him, he simply couldn't cope with his animal instinct. Hannah lay back down in bed, waving her hand. She was reassured by the fact that he wasn't fighting and everything was fine with him, and she wasn't interested in anything else. And I also asked what he does when he's having a hard time. And he said he goes to the mountains to get some fresh air, or spends an evening with the girls. She had barely fallen asleep and asked him one last time if he would like this life, and he replied that he would not, because tigers are monogamous, and he was forced to have different girls. When she fell asleep, he covered her and apologized for doing this to her because he loved her. But she didn't hear him because she was fast asleep. Since the morning, he came to the bar and ordered a lot of food, and asked for more filling and more meat. They both loved to eat deliciously. The man behind the bar was happy to see the tiger, once again emphasizing that he should come more often, but Lionel was only concerned with the food, not the idle chatter. While he was sitting at the bar waiting for his order, Hannah woke up and was already coming down the stairs to him. She greeted him, sat down next to him, and thanked him when he said he had already ordered everything and was glad to see her. It seems that she attracted a lot of attention from people around her, who wanted to know who she was and why the holy tiger was traveling with her. There were various rumors. Hannah told Lionel that she had gotten used to the fact that he was quite popular, but people just stared at them both. She asked what he had already done, because it wasn't so noisy before. He made excuses that he hadn't done anything, and people were just interested in their sex lives. And it seems she finally got what Lionel said yesterday, and he found it funny and apologized for dragging her into this gossip. People were looking for the blonde who was with him yesterday. He almost spilled his coffee when Hannah asked him if he really liked blondes. She spoke so calmly, but with curiosity. Lionel began to worry about such questions, drank coffee, and quietly said that it was just a coincidence. But what would he do if they didn't reach this village? It seems she got angry because there were reasons for his haste, and now everything is clear. That's when he decided it was time to use his seduction technique and confidently said that she could always order and restrain him. Hannah assured him that she wouldn't want him to see her as both a hostess and a snack at the same time, and said that now his problem was ruining her mood for the whole day. The man promised her that this would never happen again, and he was very sorry that he had not explained the whole situation to her sooner. Hannah asked again if he could correct his instinct, because he told her to be careful, otherwise she wouldn't be able to stop him, right? And she also remembered his words that even an ancient relic would not be able to control him in such cases of desire. He had nothing to say. She looked at him intently and asked what he would do if he couldn't control himself. He dodged the question, saying that he would listen to her and do as she ordered, because she knew best. Hannah glared at him and asked again, to make sure he was really just going to do what she told him to do. He didn't know what to say when she continued to speak, warning him that if he harmed her, he would have to die. He even found it funny how she tried to kill the last holy being on earth, People wouldn't forgive that. Hannah continued eating calmly, ending the conversation by saying that it wasn't her problem that he was in danger of extinction. This really confused him, but their conversation was interrupted by a mad woman shouting Lionel's name and ordering him to marry her immediately. While Lionel told Hannah that if something happened between them, he would take the plunge and marry her. That's a coincidence. The blonde who burst into the bar was very angry and looked directly at the tiger, waiting for his reaction. Hannah laughed, noting that the woman who came running after him was blonde, and he said it was a coincidence, but it seems not. She kept coming closer to them, and Lionel didn't even react to her and silently watched what would happen next. The woman demanded an explanation from Lionel about who the woman was next to him, because there were rumors that she was his lover. She laughed because she couldn't believe he was dating some village girl, but he warned her to watch her words. He was more worried about how she found out he had come to the city, because he was trying to hide from his exes. The woman said that it was hard not to hear, because everyone in town was just talking about the holy tiger having arrived, and everyone knew where he was. She pointed her finger at him that he owed her money and now had to marry her to pay off his debt. However, he continued to sit calmly, without changing his emotions, simply asking why he owed her anything and why he had to marry her. The woman screamed at the entire bar that he slept with her and spent more than one night with her, and now he's pretending like nothing happened. The people in the bar couldn't believe what they were hearing, laughing and buying popcorn for the show that was about to happen next. Lionel asked the woman if it wasn't consensual, and if he wasn't forcing her. Hannah sat to the side, wondering if she should listen to him. The woman started crying, screaming that everything was consensual, but because of him, she got pregnant and now he had to marry her. As soon as Hannah heard this, she realized that it was time for her to run away from there. And before she could take a step, the woman stretched out her arms and wanted to grab her by the hair. The man grabbed her hand first and warned Countess Doria Hamilton that the girl next to him had nothing to do with this. And if she wants to say something, it's only to him. It seems like this is a real love triangle where Hannah tried to escape. He asked Doria if he asked her to leave, she would finally give in. But she said only if she killed the woman next to him. This really pissed him off. He warned her again that the consequences would be dire if she touched Hannah, because it didn't concern her. Doria continued to argue that tigers are monogamous, and she was carrying his child, so it was his duty to get married and forget about other women. However, there was a but. If it was really his child, he would have married. But there was no way the child would turn out to be his. Hannah continued to eat and listen to their arguments. Not that she wasn't interested, but she pretended like she didn't care about his personal life. They both even looked at her, wondering how you could be so calm when people's fates and their relationships were being decided behind your back. He asked her to come up to the room because he was uncomfortable in front of her, because it didn't concern her and could ruin their relationship. Hannah refused, because they would have to leave soon anyway, and she wanted to have a quiet breakfast before she went to pack her things, which irritated the woman. She raised her hand to hit Hannah, shouting that she was interfering in her relationship with Lionel, and that if it weren't for her, everything would be fine. Fortunately, the man's reaction was faster, and he stopped her, grabbing her hand and telling her that his patience with her was over. And he ordered them to stop, because they wouldn't succeed anyway. She pulled her hand away from him, which was bruised from his hatred. She tripped on her heels and fell, and he reminded her that he had warned her not to touch his companion or she would get hurt. But he said that if she didn't know, a child from a magical creature could only appear if the creature itself wanted it. And even more so, he told her back then that he wasn't going to continue the relationship with her. She cried and asked whose child it was if he didn't recognize her. She begged him to change his mind until the end. Lionel glared at her angrily and told her to ask herself this question. Who else had she slept with? But it definitely wasn't him. She continued to cry, promising that this was his child because her future fate depended on it, so she held on to him until the very end. A man came up to her and helped her up to take her home. The people around her watched in silence. Lionel stood in the middle of the bar and waited for her to disappear, then said they were running late and asked Hannah to go to her room. While she ordered another plate of food, she really loved to eat, lots and lots of it. He returned to her and sat down next to her, apologizing again for the whole argument and hoping that it wouldn't stop them from traveling further. She told him to keep hoping because she wouldn't want to find herself in a similar situation again. He asked her why she was saying that again. Does she really feel sorry for those girls who know what they are getting into? And besides, she is not his child. The girl didn't quite understand his reaction, and he reminded her that he was great at noticing every little thing. After all, when he was at his most serious, Hannah didn't care about that girl's safety. And now, she says she feels sorry for Doria. He is truly surprised how one person can have such different personalities. But she really didn't like it when the other girl took out her anger on her, but didn't tell Lionel about it, and so she just kept quiet. He asked if she had any other questions about his personal life, and so she was a little curious if it was really his child. He swore it wasn't his, and he didn't want to have children yet. And now, he was curious what she thought of him. She nodded that she had no more questions, and that was all the information she wanted to know. She didn't understand what thoughts he was talking about, and he was interested in whether she thought about what a disgusting man he was who led a promiscuous sex life. But she seemed more concerned about why he was so happy after all this noise, as if nothing had happened. He wanted to snuggle closer to her, but she pushed him away because he was interfering with her food, and it was her problem anyway. And the truth is, it's not her problem, and she can't do anything about him hanging out with random people and doing all sorts of bad things. It seems like it's just a feature of his species, and besides, he's not her boyfriend, she said, continuing to eat. But she asked that it would be good if such scenes didn't happen again. It wasn't his fault, but she wouldn't want every one of his exes yelling at her. They sat uncomfortably, and he apologized again and said he would do whatever she asked. But she had heard it too many times to believe him. But she still had one more question. He turned to her and wanted to hear it. Otherwise, he already thought they had quarreled. Wow, it even seemed to him that Hannah was worried, even though she seemed so cold-blooded and selfish. Usually people start to get nervous when they realize they might cross the line of what is allowed. She always cared about what was going on in other people's lives. And here she warned him that he could not answer the questions if he didn't want to. Now it seemed to him that he was interested in her, and his heart began to beat faster. He promised to answer honestly and without a drop of lies. She smiled mysteriously and asked if he really liked blondes. Here his heart sank. He expected her to ask about his feelings. It wasn't something he had an answer for. Hannah laughed and said that now he was caught, and he asked her to ask another question, but not that one. A few days later, they stopped in another town and decided to go have lunch and rest a bit, which made her very happy. They found a free table and sat down to choose dishes. He suggested that she order whatever she wanted and could take food for the evening. But then their joy was interrupted by one piece of bad news. The girl overheard a conversation about the daughter of feudal Lord Hamilton. People said that she committed suicide because she was pregnant and didn't know who the father of the child was, which was a great shame for their family. But unfortunately, no one except Lionel knew that her father himself had pushed her to do this in order to preserve his honor. She hid her anxiety and asked if he was okay, and if they could go somewhere else because it was very noisy. Since they had only come to eat anyway, he suggested they eat as quickly as possible and get out of there. She took his hand when she saw how upset he was. Lionel really didn't want it to turn out like this. They continued to sit in silence, and she held his hand to support him in some way. They spent the evening in the cave. It was raining heavily, so they lit a fire to warm themselves somehow. And Lionel finally wanted to talk. He said that for that woman, honor was no more important than life. So she didn't do this to herself, but she made her condition worse. That girl acted stupidly by telling everyone that she was pregnant and didn't know who the father was, which brought her father's reputation into question. She once told him that she lived like a cage in her father's house and dreamed of escaping from there, but it wasn't that easy. When you were the daughter of a feudal lord, as a woman, it was important for her to marry successfully. She had no other choice, and she waited for her father to give her to someone, or she would find him herself. And that's probably why she went to him then, so that he would free her. And that's why she was so scared when she found out about the pregnancy too late. He didn't think she would commit suicide. She wanted to live and was ready to do anything to escape, and even marry the first man she liked. Hannah lay on his shoulder and said that she was listening to him carefully and knew how sorry he was, but he couldn't change anything. He smiled a little. She was the only one who comforted him and understood him without judging or prying into his soul. He held her close to him, and he couldn't stop looking at how cute she was. Despite the cold outside, it was very hot between them. After Doria's mother died, her father found a foster son who would inherit his title in the future, and his daughter, who was left with nothing, had no value for him in the female market, so she became his main complaint. But despite everything, her father had no right to do this to her. After all, she was his own daughter. Hannah closed her eyes and snuggled against his chest. She completely agreed with him, but there was nothing anyone could do about it. He smiled and asked if she was trying to comfort him, but she was just telling the truth as it was. Lionel said that being human is hard, especially when you have a conscience and compassion for others. Hannah touched his face, looked him straight in the eye, and said she could see how he became more like a normal person when he said things like that. They looked into each other's eyes, and she asked him not to be upset because she could see how worried he was. She had always looked into his golden eyes like a predator's and was afraid. But now everything was different, and she told him that he had changed. He smiled. He was pleased. And he said that she only said that because she was human and felt that way. She was almost falling asleep on his chest and probably said it out of tiredness, but she admitted that she was starting to like him now. He looked at her and couldn't believe his ears. What if something never happened? It meant a lot to him. But Hannah remembered something and noticed that if she liked him, she definitely didn't have any sexual feelings for him, so he knew. But even so, the main thing for him was that she became friendly towards him and showed sympathy. The girl asked if she had talked too much to the 1,000-year-old god. After all, her tongue was her enemy, and he just patted her head sweetly. As soon as she realized she was too close to him, she wanted to move away, but he pressed her even closer to him. Then she tensed up and took his hand off her shoulders, saying that she was already very hot and it was time to move away. He smiled, agreeing with her that sitting and hugging wasn't so easy. It was really getting hot. And Hannah warned him that if he wanted an easily accessible woman, then he should go somewhere else and his apologies wouldn't change anything. He himself began to get nervous because her face was the same as it was then, and he wasn't yet used to tricky conversations with her and was ready to do anything to keep her from getting angry. She said she didn't need anything except to avoid his unnecessary touches, even though he was handsome, but she didn't need a one-night stand. But he reminded her that she was the one who started touching him first, and now she was making claims against him. She denied that it was friendly. If this is her answer, then he can also say that he touched her in a friendly way. She argued that it didn't work that way, and she wasn't a child to not notice the difference between their touches. Although he was joking, he better be careful. She assured him that everything was fine and that he shouldn't worry. They were still on friendly terms if he was worried. Lionel wondered why she hadn't ordered him then, for the sake of the relic that obeyed her. But she reminded him that they had already had this conversation. She was not his mistress, and it was unlikely that an ancient relic would be able to stop him, right? What if he's bluffing because he doesn't want to be controlled by magic, and she might try to use it even if he's against it? Still, there were many times when she could have used it, but for some reason didn't want to. Hannah said that she might have wanted to, but it was difficult to do at the time. Really? And he wondered what was difficult. She smiled and made an attractive face, and slyly said that maybe she didn't stop him then only because she wanted to touch him first. He sat there excitedly when she assured him it was a joke, but he clarified that it didn't really sound like a joke and was even scaring him. Then Hannah agreed that maybe it really didn't seem like a joke, and it was true. I wonder if he would believe her now. He himself didn't know what to believe. She had confused all his thoughts. What a cunning cat. And now he didn't know what to say. With concern, I asked if this was a joke, and Hannah played the fool and said that maybe she didn't know. No one knew. And so it turned out. Lionel noticed that she really knew how to handle men, although she usually hid her skills. He said that it was very uncomfortable to joke in front of a handsome guy, and showed the charm of his cute face, and he might fall for her flirtation. But she said that despite all the jokes, she doesn't want a one-night stand. She's not so simple-minded as to give herself to the first guy who says a few sweet words. The man saw that she simply didn't want a close relationship, didn't want to be trapped in a relationship that could easily change. But what would she do if she really fell in love? She was angry that he knew her so well. It seemed like he really remembered everything she said and how she behaved. Hannah stood up nervously, remembering that it was raining outside and it was already late and it was time to go to bed. Otherwise, they would be talking too much. His mistake was telling her to calm down. He wouldn't make a hole in the blanket because of her. And then he laughed, saying that he spent too much time with the mercenaries and had picked up their bad manners. She laughed too and said that he looked like an old man who had learned new words. He said that she could cut a tiger without a knife and was not ashamed of it. Lionel started taking off his shirt, saying that it was time to get ready for bed, and tomorrow was a long journey to the elves. Hannah quickly turned around and shouted at him that she needed to be warned before undressing, and that he would only be happy to get her off. He turned into a tiger and said he knew why she wasn't looking, because she was afraid she wouldn't be able to stop and would touch him. The tiger lay down and told Hannah that it was time to go to bed, and that she should sit next to him. Out of friendship, of course. Before she could say anything, he wrapped his tail around her and pulled her close. When they were lying together in an embrace, she reminded them that they should definitely buy a sleeping bag, even though the tiger thought it was much warmer. Hannah was all sweaty and shaking. She could hear the sound of rain and didn't understand why she was outside and had a headache and no strength. In reality, Lionel was running as fast as he could, holding Hannah in his arms, who seemed to have caught a cold, so he ran to the nearest town to the hospital. He asked her to be patient and laid her on the bed, and they put a bandage on her head to bring down her temperature. She woke up and didn't understand where she was, and only vaguely saw the figure of a man in front of her, and then fell asleep. It was then, while she was sleeping, that he confessed that he loved her and wanted her to get well, just so she wouldn't leave him. Lionel stood over her bed while she slept, kissing her hands and forehead, hoping it would help her heal faster. Morning came, the warm sun shone directly into her room, and she felt even better. The nurse came to visit the girl and said that it had been 2 days since she had slept, and that she would now bring her some porridge and something to drink so that she would recover. Hannah asked where Lionel was, and learned that a lot of bad weather had occurred due to a heavy downpour, and he agreed to help the people in the village. So it really was like Lionel, who is always ready to help people in trouble, because he is a hero to these people for a reason. The nurse told her exactly where he had gone, and Hannah wanted to see him, so she went into town to find him. Everyone in the city only talked about him and his heroic deeds. People loved him because he helped everyone who was in trouble. He is indeed a very popular tiger, and people honor him by calling him by his full, holy name, because we don't forget that he is holy. And here he is, talking to the men he was helping sort out the aftermath of the storm. He's as serious as ever. But what a handsome boy he is, she thought, and came closer to say hello, because it had been 2 days since she had seen him. He saw her and was immediately overjoyed, shouting her name and running up to her to say hello. He enthusiastically asked how she was feeling, if she needed anything else, and if she should go back to her room because she wasn't fully recovered yet. She didn't understand why it was so hard for her to look him in the eyes. Her heart was starting to pound even harder. It was probably because she had a strange dream. In it, she dreamed as if he was standing over her and kissing her hand and telling her he loved her. But it was probably just a dream. He leaned towards her, not understanding why she wasn't looking him in the eye. It seemed to him that she was still not well and needed to rest. She refused and said she was very hungry, but he had just heard that the feudal lord was cooking very delicious meat and invited her to breakfast. Even if a feudal lord came to help people after a thunderstorm and offered them free food, the consequences were serious. Lionel smiled and said that the consequences weren't too big. Only a few people were washed away, and nothing happened. Hannah looked at him, not understanding what was funny about it, and asked if anything good had happened besides the bad news. He smiled again and was happy to see her anger, saying that he was glad to see that she was feeling better and that she was angry with him again. She thought about it, but they were both glad to be able to travel again, because they were already 2 days late and it was time to leave soon. She asked why he continued to talk to her in that tone, but he said if it wasn't bothering her, he would continue. Very little time has passed since she woke up, and she is already in the mood to fight and sort out their relationship again. She thought she was really being too strict with him, so she held out her hand to him and said only if it was friendship, and he agreed. They held hands and walked through the village to have breakfast and rest together, as she still hadn't fully recovered. They haven't been this happy in a long time. It's not for nothing that they say that true friends are recognized in trouble. And that's exactly what it is. Hannah was very grateful to him because he didn't even sleep and looked after her the whole time. And all because she was very exhausted from the trip and he felt guilty. He was glad that she woke up and tried to feed her so that she would become stronger and could continue her journey, but more slowly. Her smile seems to have become more natural, probably because of that night in the cave when they finally got closer. Lionel thought about how he didn't want to get close to her at first, but something changed, and he started to understand people better. Hannah didn't hear what he said and looked up at him, wondering why he was mumbling, but the food was too delicious to be distracted by conversation. He wiped her face and said that he had specifically attracted attention in the village to find someone to help move the relic. But for a long time, he could not find the right person until he met the one who was destined for him by fate. Hannah said it was all a coincidence that they were connected by the relic, but he denied it because he believed that coincidences were not coincidences. The girl noticed that she was dirty again and wiped her face herself, asking him not to touch her face again, otherwise people would see. He laughed and asked her if it was a problem if people thought they were a couple. Hannah didn't think it was a problem, but this false gossip made Lionel tired of finding another way out of the situation, and he got up from the table. He got down on one knee and pulled out the ring, saying that from the moment he first saw her, he knew she was the one for him. She stood with her mouth wide open, and he continued to say that she should no longer hide her feelings, especially when she was in front of him. As soon as he was about to propose to her, she screamed loudly and took the fork, raising it in her hands to the mountain. She hit him on the forehead with a fork with all her strength, but he didn't faint. He was just disappointed because it wasn't what he expected. People around him wanted to save him, but he assured them that everything was fine and touched his forehead, realizing that a fork was sticking out of his forehead. Blood was flowing from his forehead, and he was laughing and saying that she was the best and that he loved her for her character. Lionel pulled the fork out of his forehead and asked if she just didn't like the design of the wedding ring, which was already 300 years old, but it seemed the problem wasn't the wedding ring. He asked her not to be so angry, but after all, the woman he loved had just stuck a fork in him, so he should be angry. She just wanted to argue when he stuffed a piece of cheese into her mouth so she could eat it and shut up. The girls behind them looked at them and could not understand how such a handsome man, the holy spirit of the mountains who transforms into a tiger, could fall in love with her. An ordinary, not beautiful girl without family or status. They didn't understand what he found in her, except for her big appetite. The first rumors have already spread in the village that Saint Lionel fell in love at first sight with a girl from the village and is pursuing her throughout the country. They said he was going to the capital to get married to her, but she was secretly a princess from another country. She was called a selfish princess who rejected the offer of a man that all the women of this country wanted, selfishly. She came to dinner with him very angry because she had heard terrible gossip about herself through him. But he heard from people that Hannah had bewitched him and that to win her over, the next man must defeat the holy tiger. He did a nice thing in person to charm her, but she angrily replied that this was not a solution to the problem and that all this gossip was because of him. He told her that he proposed because of true feelings, but she still doesn't believe it and is looking for a way to avoid these false rumors. She was angry that wherever she went, everyone only talked about her. And just weeks ago, no one even knew who she was. She didn't even feel comfortable eating in a cafe because she felt like she was living the life of a celebrity and wanted everything to go back to the way it was before. He said that the closer to the capital, the worse it gets, and that this gossip won't end soon, but he hoped that she would eat and get better. In fact, he was happy when people talked about them. It suited him because he wanted everyone to know how much he loved her, and she was acting stupid. On the trip, she was constantly angry with him, and it amused him. He would change clothes in front of her, and she would nag him to get out of here. Even when she drank water from the bottle he was drinking from, Lionel said that it meant we had our first kiss, and if she liked it, they could do it for real. He yelled at him to stop joking like that, because he was behaving worse than a rude child. He was incredibly amused by all this. He smiled charmingly at the girl, saying that cats are playful by nature. And to make sure his beauty worked, he turned into a cute little kitten to enter her heart. She was devastated inside when she saw him. But she couldn't lose and succumb to his beauty. He purred and ran around her feet, asking if she had forgiven him yet, because he would continue to meow, meow, meow. The little tiger ran around her and meowed, and she closed her eyes and, despite his beauty, tried to hold on so as not to be deceived by his beauty. Then he lay on his back, showing his fluffy belly, and waved his paws, asking if she had forgiven him yet. At that moment, her patience snapped, and she screamed that it wasn't fair, so she took him in her arms and cried because he was so soft. And he laughed that she really couldn't stand his tiger image when she continued to hug him. The tiger blushed and warned her that he had already told her that when she kissed his stomach, it was the same as touching the stomach of an adult. Hearing this, she threw him out of her hands and decided it was time to wash her mouth. He had told her this in vain. She said they should talk when he becomes a human, and preferably gets dressed because she can't watch it. However, he asked if she had changed her mind after all. She liked touching his fluffy belly. When asked if she liked blondes, she said that brunettes were prettier. He smiled and said that only his head was yellow. He was a tiger and his hair was dark in other places. He could check. He got dressed and said that they could continue their journey. There was still a short distance to the village. She hadn't seen so many people in a long time. It seemed like a festival would start here soon. Lionel said that this was a trading town, and it was always like that here. He offered to buy her anything she wanted, and he would pay for it. She liked the idea and thought about it. They came to the market, and he advised her to buy some jewelry for herself, so he led her to the counter with valuables. While Hannah was choosing jewelry, he listened to what the people behind him were saying. They recognized him and were interested in his new girlfriend. The girls behind him wanted to approach him to say hello, but they thought he was on a date with a girl, so they didn't bother them. Even though he was used to it, Hannah was still uncomfortable, and he didn't want her to hear gossip about his exes. Hannah distracted him from his thoughts by calling him. It seemed she had found something she liked. She asked him which was better, a hairpin or a rubber band. She didn't really want to buy something very expensive. He laughed and assured her that he could buy her anything she wanted, but if she liked it, he would buy it. Looking at her, he realized that Hannah was the only reason he was comfortable in this relationship. That sweet look of hers, the way she thinks and looks awkward, like a deer that has encountered a predator. But if she pretends to be sick, she will definitely approach him because she has incredible human kindness. Even though she is an introvert by nature, she is incredibly calm and friendly, comfortable and caring, and it seems like she will never fall in love with him. Looking at her, she was so absorbed in her curiosity about the jewelry that he watched her like a predator. And this seemed very tempting to him. He loved to hunt, and her innocence was very interesting and attractive to him. She aroused a lot of interest in him. And she, not expecting this, was choosing between a hairpin and a rubber band. He couldn't help but touch her hair, stroking her ear. Lightly and gently, it tempted him. The girl turned to look at him, but he had already withdrawn his hand, and she thought she had just imagined it. Lionel looked at her seductively. He liked this game. As soon as she returned to the counter looking at the jewelry, he reached his hand for her hair again, wanting to stroke it. But before he could reach it, she felt his presence. She turned her head towards him and caught him. Not letting him touch her hair, she warned him without unnecessary touching. The girl walked away from him, thanked the saleswoman, and ignored the man. And once again, he felt how cold-blooded she was. He said that her feelings were almost on the same level as those of wild animals. She smiled and said that she had heard this many times before. Lionel walked beside her excitedly, thinking what a fool he was to suffer because of a woman at such an age. He should calm down. But then a feeling tore him from his thoughts. He turned around because he sensed danger behind him. As Hannah continued walking, he stopped and quickly pulled out his spear, pointing it at the man's throat. He pulled Hannah by the arm and hugged her, protecting her and holding the spear to defend them both. The man who had been following them greeted them and apologized for following them, asking if Lionel remembered him. Of course, Lionel didn't remember that man because he had met many people in the 1,000 years he had lived. Judging by his clothes, he's a mercenary, he whispered to Hannah, while she was angry that he kept hugging her. Lionel had seen a similar face somewhere, and the smell reminded him of a mercenary named Chen. They were quite similar. The man said that the one the tiger was talking about was his grandfather, who had once served as a mercenary and went on campaigns with Lionel. Lionel warned him that his grandfather should have taught him not to sneak up behind him, otherwise that spear might get stuck in his neck. And if he was already pursuing them, then let him show you where the best hotel is, and at the same time, tell you what business he has with them. He agreed and was about to give his name, but they interrupted him and told him to shut up now and tell them on the way. The man was escorting them to the hotel, and the tiger was walking behind, hugging Hannah, and he was only interested in why she wasn't screaming for him to take his paws away. That great-grandson of Chen's brought them to dinner and said he was glad the gossip turned out to be true, and he found himself a girlfriend. He's heard a lot about Lionel falling in love, and lately people have been really into discussing his personal life. Then Lionel asked him why everyone was interested in his personal life and talking about it. He wasn't pursuing them for that. The man agreed that he really had something for them. He needed help. And he wanted to introduce them to someone else. The holy tiger warned that if he didn't see, he was too busy guarding the girl nearby. But she didn't care because she was only concerned about food. He assured me that it was completely safe and would not prevent her from continuing to be guarded. It was simply an important matter regarding the Guamo Road. This road had been closed for thousands of years, and not so long ago it was open to people. But they were still afraid to step into the territory of spirits, so they wanted him to lead them there. He said that they would need to go to a meeting with the mercenaries and find out more details about the case later. As soon as the man left, Lionel took his hand from hers, and she watched him intently, without saying a word. She stared for a long time, and he was already waiting for the question she had been preparing for so long. She was interested in the deer Guamo, about whom she had never heard anything before. So he told me that near this city, there are the Guamo Mountains. There is a road there where fairies live who mock people. The road to the capital is very long, but if you take the Guamo Road, you can cover half the distance and be in the capital a few days faster. But the problem was that it was unknown where the path of the fairies might lead, as they often preyed on people and changed paths. Therefore, he said that it would be worth bringing gifts to the fairies to appease them and let them go on the right path. He admired her and was about to tuck her hair behind her ear, but she got angry and told him not to do that again. Then he asked if she didn't like it so much, why she didn't say anything when he hugged her. She replied that she saw him consider the man dangerous and understood that this was why he was hugging her, to protect her. He smiled and asked if she really trusted him so much now, because if so, he was very glad that their relationship had improved. Then Hannah laughed too, asking if she could ask something more strange. He was intrigued that she was so frank with him. Hannah said that if she fell in love with him and wanted to continue the journey, it would no longer be beneficial to him. And if he kept hugging her, she thought there must be a reason for it. And so, she understood everything correctly. She knew he only asked her about it because he thought she was in love with him. But she assured him, once again, that he didn't have to worry because she would never fall in love with him. Never. He looked at her again and said that she was very cruel. If she knew about it but kept saying it over and over, breaking his heart. But she had a way out. If he ran 7 laps around the capital naked, she would consider his proposal or let him build a bridge out of precious stones. They left the cafe. She was very satisfied because she had eaten heartily, and he was just glad that she was in the mood. She felt a little cold, and he saw it, hugging her and warming the tiger with his warmth. She raised her head to look at him, and he said he didn't want her to get sick again, so he didn't just hug her. She put her head on his shoulder and said that it wasn't because she was tired, she just suddenly realized that she was used to his heartbeat. While he was wondering when they had gotten so close again, She was enjoying the moment by saying that she couldn't wait for him to pay her. But Lionel ignored her words and simply enjoyed the moment. From happiness, he even had tiger ears and a tail. The man asked Hannah what she thought about traveling with the mercenaries, but she assured him that she didn't care, so they could agree. She actually said that if it weren't for this question, she would think that he didn't care either and wasn't worried. He smiled knowingly, which is why he asked so she wouldn't think he was just as cold-blooded. She kindly asked why he was so afraid of them, to which he assured her that mercenaries could not be trusted. There were many scumbags among them. Hearing this, she asked if they were all shitheads. Then he was the king among them and looked at him with a mysterious smile. He was silent at first and then found something to say. Yes, they are shit. Everyone except him. If he was so worried about this trip, then how could she manage without him? Hannah asked him. Lionel hugged her tightly and assured her that he wouldn't leave her and that she would go with him. It didn't seem like she was happy about that. Hannah said that's why she likes bayonet girls, because they didn't drag her into various adventures and dangers. But I have black hair in other places. You can show me if you don't believe me, he said. She thanked him and refused. He laughed at her again and said he was very sorry, but he really wanted to show off his hair. As they walked through the market, Hannah saw homemade alcohol, and Lionel asked if she knew how to drink. He could treat her. Looking at the mead, she wanted to try it. She likes sweet things, and he likes strong things, and he was only thinking about the possible consequences if they got drunk. She turned to him and, smiling, said that they should try this mead, even though he warned about the high alcohol content. Vi followed her and thought that he had never spent so much time with one girl in 1,000 years. He was truly attracted by her sweet scent. He offered her a drink of bamboo alcohol, and she was very happy because it was her favorite drink, and she agreed. He froze in place when she suggested drinking it another time. He wanted to suggest it himself. The man blushed and praised her for being very insightful, for reading his thoughts. It seems like he's really been spending a lot of time with her, that she's even starting to say what he wants. Only faster. Looking at her, he realized that he would have died of boredom. But she was so funny and knew how to successfully tease him. They entered the mercenary guild, where two people were already waiting for them, for the sake of a common cause. Seeing Lionel, the man happily approached and greeted him, saying that he was glad to see him. He noticed that it wasn't like before, and there wasn't a single person he knew, only thugs and scoundrels, and warned him that Hannah would be with him. The man said that it was not worth bringing her, but if the lady had already come, maybe she wanted to have tea in their office. Lionel laughed, remembering that he was more resourceful than his grandfather. Chen was terribly clumsy. He introduced them to Pokins, who would keep Hannah company while they discussed men's affairs, although she was not happy. Seeing the couple, Pokins said that she didn't want to babysit that child. She was first and foremost a hired hand, not some kind of nanny. She was more interested in the handsome guy next to her. She would have liked to leave with him. Although Chen assured her that the man had a girlfriend, Pokins wasn't really interested in this. A busy husband wasn't a problem for her, and she started flirting with the tiger, not knowing who he really was. Hannah suggested that Lionel leave, and he agreed. They clearly didn't like such company. Chen apologized to him and tried to calm Pokins, apologizing to both of them because he didn't want to lose his companions for the upcoming journey. He took the girls to the office to have tea and get to know each other, but they didn't seem too happy to be together. Lionel watched this hurriedly, but one thing was important to him, Hannah's safety, so he followed. Chen asked him to go into the room where the man who needed the tiger's help was sitting, and he agreed. An old gray-haired man sat and happily welcomed Lionel. For him, it was a real honor that he agreed to come. The man introduced himself as Chad Marina, and he had been looking for a meeting with a tiger for a long time, and had once seen one from afar in his youth. The old man handed Lionel a letter in which he wrote the payment for the service and the requirements for the trip, which, in principle, suited the tiger. Chen said that Mr. Chad was very lucky that he agreed, because accompanying a tiger is something that not everyone can afford. But the tiger had his own conditions. Instead of half the money that they would have to pay him later, they would fulfill his conditions. The two of them were so happy when they heard that the tiger had asked them, instead of money, to arrange comfortable conditions for Hannah on this journey and provide her with everything she needed. The men asked the tiger if he was really with her. He simply replied that they only had one thing in common and nothing more. But those men knew that things weren't that simple, because the two of them were attracting other people's attention with their relationship. Chen loved to talk about love, so he shouted that he saw the tiger loving her and it was so cute, he thought it was not worth hiding it. Lionel showed him his fist and asked if Chen remembered exactly what he had been told earlier, or if he should remind him. Chad was once again grateful to the tiger for his help, and said that they should meet tomorrow, and then they could set off on their journey. Lionel, as he walked down the stairs with Chen, said that a share of the money he earned would go to him if he helped. The condition was to keep a close eye on Hannah's surroundings. Chen was very happy and could not even think of such generosity from the tiger. The girls were having tea and talking when Lionel entered the room and saw that the two girls had become friends. He asked if they were finished talking because it was time for them to return to the hotel. Hannah was very happy to see him and said that they had already finished talking, and Lionel warned that they were leaving tomorrow morning. Hannah also mentioned to her husband that Pokins had talked about dinner tonight at the mercenary bar to strengthen their friendship. She reminded him that they wanted to have a drink together today, so this would be a good opportunity, and asked if he would mind going for a walk in the evening. He said that wasn't the point, because it wouldn't just be a dinner to strengthen friendships, as she thought. The girl hid behind Lionel's back, because she knew that he would always protect her, and he warned that not all mercenaries were as good as Chen. Hiding behind him, she said she wanted to ask him something, and he agreed to listen to her. There were too many people there that she was seeing for the first time, and he had once told her to beware of mercenaries, and she had asked him to be by her side. She looked at him with the frightened eyes of a fawn and apologized if she was bothering him, but she was really scared. He was pleased that she was counting on him and agreed to be with her, but suggested that he come closer to everyone. They were met by Chen, who had been waiting for them for a long time. He shouted loudly to the other men in that bar to finally shut their mouths because it was too loud. He ordered them all to greet Miss Hannah, because she was a VIP guest at this bar. She greeted everyone politely to please them. One of the mercenaries said that you should bow when introducing yourself to other people, and she got very excited. But Chen reassured her that these were just jokes and suggested everyone have fun. Lionel asked her to listen carefully to him and remember the ones he pointed out, those who were best avoided in this bar. He also showed her several other men with whom they would be traveling, but asked her to be careful with them even though he would be around. She was interested in the man who was sitting all alone. He hid his face and sat apart from everyone without saying a single word. Lionel assured her that the man wouldn't hurt her because he wasn't a mercenary like everyone else. He was an elf. Oh, this elf really stood out among the other men here. He didn't draw any attention to himself at all and sat very quietly. Hannah fell silent as soon as she heard it was an elf. Something was bothering her, but she didn't show any emotions. Lionel said that he had once met with the Prime Minister of the Elves, Ezekiel Escott, and they agreed to help each other in times of need. He wanted to continue the conversation but saw Hannah's face and asked if everything was okay. She assured him that she was not comfortable sitting next to a handsome guy. And indeed, the men nearby were discussing Hannah and him. Otherwise, he would have thought she was drunk even before she drank. And those are just stupid men. For some reason, Lionel remembered some promise and asked the girl if she wanted to listen. And she cheered up. Hannah was a little distracted when he told her about a promise, and she asked if it was okay for them to talk about it here. The girl heard that tigers and lions can become divine beings, but elves cannot. Or is she mistaken? But the elves long to become these saints, to leave this world and create a new dimension. And so, he decided to help them. Hannah heard a familiar voice and turned to look where it was coming from and saw a familiar man near the bar. She begged Lionel to let her meet him. She had known him for a long time. He used to bring groceries to their cafe. He looked at him and really didn't see any danger, so he agreed to let her go. The old man seemed kind. The only thing he asked was not to go too far, and to call him in case of danger. After all, he would worry about her. After all, her life was very dear to him now, he warned the girl. The girl smiled and agreed to be careful, and in case of danger, she would use the relic for defense. Because of his excitement, he didn't even think about what he was doing when he approached the girl and kissed her on the forehead. She wasn't expecting that, but he did it to let everyone know that she was his girlfriend, and if anyone touched her, he would kill everyone. And he told Hannah to do it in order to mark the territory. Although she sensed deception in his words, she had already come to terms with it. She approached the man, greeted him, and began to chat nicely, and he immediately recognized her. He watched her from afar, drinking wine to speed up the time. When she wasn't with him, the minutes passed like hours. The husband saw how much fun she had with other people, and was jealous because he wanted her to spend time only with him. He never thought that something like this would ever happen. He sat sadly waiting for her return, but someone interrupted his sadness when he called his name. The same woman, Chen's friend, came to keep him company and asked if he would drink wine with her. He didn't even look her in the eye and poured a glass of wine, continuing to watch Hannah. The woman thanked him and asked how he wanted her to thank him, because they could go to her house together. He refused, but she was persistent and took his hand, moving closer. Although he refused, she said she wouldn't mind and insisted on going with her because she asked Hannah what connected them, and she replied that it was only work. He was upset to hear her answer, and that they were only connected by business relations, when he wanted more. She assured him that she was quite skilled, and that he didn't know yet what he was giving up, because he might regret it, and she sat closer and closer to him. While she was trying to flirt with him, he was only thinking about his relationship with Hannah, and she was just getting in his way. Pokins assured him that he wouldn't find a girl more beautiful than her, so he shouldn't refuse. But he refused because he wasn't looking for beauty. And at that moment, Chen stepped between them. Seeing the tension between Pokins and Lionel, he didn't want to spoil the relationship before the road. She screamed for him to get out of here and not interfere with her personal life. And Chen said she was just joking and they should try the local alcohol. He asked them to drink and not fight. The main thing is not to offend the holy tiger. Although it was already too late, and he became angry. Chen almost cried and asked them not to fight, because he was trying to cheer everyone up. Lionel only had to look at Chen once to understand everything, because he asked Chen to make her disappear. So he silently picked up Pokins and carried her slowly to the exit, complaining that she was too heavy to carry. Lionel sat alone, sad, finishing another bottle of wine. The evening seemed to go by forever, and Hannah was still gone. He left the bag of money on the table, paid for the wine, and walked away from the bar. He couldn't wait any longer. It was then that Hannah approached the table and saw that no one was there, but he promised to wait for her. This surprised her as to where he had disappeared to. Apparently, other matters had arisen. But why didn't he warn her then and simply disappeared? Hannah sat for a long time waiting for him, got hungry and ordered food and drinks. You can't wait for him hungry. And so another hour passed. She lay on the table drinking and thinking only about how much she wanted him to wait for her. Morning, she was woken up by the sun's rays shining directly into the room. Yesterday was a long evening, and she went to bed late. Since she was used to waking up with Lionel next to her, she was surprised to find herself alone in the hotel. Last night, she waited for him until late at night, but he never came. So she talked to the mercenaries. And when she left, she already found out that Pokins had insulted Lionel, and that's why he left the bar faster. So she got to her room alone. It seems she has become accustomed to waking up with Lionel, hugging him, and in the warmth of his soft fur, and definitely not in a hug with a pillow. This is clearly not how she planned to spend the evening and morning. She got angry, holding the pillow in her hands and strangling it because the thoughts of Lionel were annoying. I needed to pull myself together and stop thinking about him. He's not the only man in this world. Hannah got dressed and went downstairs for breakfast, where Lionel was already waiting, looking upset. He was happy to see the girl, greeted her, and said he had already ordered breakfast. Is it because of yesterday that he is so calm? She asked if something had happened, if someone had spoiled his mood. Otherwise, how could she explain why he was so quiet and depressed? He calmly shook his head that everything was fine, and it just seemed that way to her. Even though she saw that something was wrong, he wouldn't admit it. Usually when he's in a bad mood, he talks about it, but not now. So they just sat at the table in almost silence. He was clearly lying about something and didn't want to reveal his feelings, but she couldn't question him. So he changed the subject and said that she was somehow different today, somehow not calm. She still wanted to talk to him about what was worrying him, but he changed the subject again and started talking about food and that they might be late. She had hoped they would still have a chance to talk about it, but now they really had to go because the mercenaries couldn't wait much longer. In order not to communicate with anyone, he even turned into a tiger, avoiding them all. Chad himself didn't understand why yesterday had offended him so much. He caught up with Hannah and asked if she happened to know why Mr. Lionel was in a bad mood and if it was possible because of yesterday. The girl asked him for details because she left before him and doesn't know what exactly happened between them. Chad said that they just added a little more trouble to him, and it's no wonder he's nervous, because Pokins went a little overboard. Not knowing anything, he asked Hannah to tell him if there were any requests or inconveniences. He would take care of her. Her attention was distracted by Pokins, who came with one question. Is Hannah dating Lionel? She had heard that there was a conflict between him and Pokins. Pokins asked if Hannah had heard about her terrible attempt to seduce Lionel the previous night. And of course, everyone in the bar had already heard about it. She said that she called Hannah dirty, and that's why he got angry and put her in her place, because Hannah really needed new clothes to wear. Pokins continued to look at the girl and did not understand how she could be so blind, pretending not to understand the man's feelings. She decided to say it directly, but she stopped the girl by saying that he loved Hannah. The girl denied everything, believed that Pokins had been rejected, and that was why she was saying that. But she reminded him that maybe there was a reason he had lived for 1,300 years without ever getting married. Hannah said that Lionel's type was blonde, tall, and slender women, especially beautiful, not like her. Pokins pounced on her, shouting that she was completely stupid and couldn't see anything. She ordered her to go grab him by the neck and kiss him. Immediately! She gave her a new shirt and ordered it immediately, before the horses were completely frightened by the giant tiger in front of them. The shirt was very cute and just right for her style, and that's how Pokins wanted to apologize to her, and so she gave her shirt away. Hannah warned Lionel that she was going to change and would be back in a few minutes. He heard but paid no attention. She came back in fresh clothes that suited her very well. She's beautiful, and it's time to go satisfy the big cat, no matter what. He walked forward without looking back, his stern gaze fixed on the road, his eyes alert for the danger surrounding them. Hannah came up and asked if anything bad happened yesterday, and of course he was silent, but his tail wagged. And he was a really stubborn cat. She said that Pokins had given her fresh clothes, expecting him to look at them, but he coldly replied that he would buy her new clothes in the next town. The girl asked him where he went yesterday, because she had been waiting for him for a long time, but he said that he didn't have to report to her. She smiled and assured him that he shouldn't, but she was worried if he was okay, so she waited and then looked for him. Then the girl asked if she could put her hand on his back, and since he didn't answer, she did. At first, they walked silently together, with her hand on his shoulder, waiting for him to speak first. It didn't happen, so she started first. Yesterday, she was scared to stay in the bar, so she waited. But he reminded her that she didn't ask him to stay. Of course, she couldn't argue with him, so she just agreed. But she still thought he would come back. She reminded him that no matter what happened, he could always tell her. After all, she was worried and wanted to be friends with the big cat. He wasn't happy to hear that, but she said that next time he would definitely warn her when he was going somewhere. He asked if she really missed him, and she replied that he was her friend, even though he was a magical creature. But she was worried. She hoped that his mood would improve now that he was wagging his tail. But no, the word friend annoyed him. Lionel asked if she had had a good chat with her friend, and she was glad to see him, even if it was just for half an hour. She saw that he lowered his tail, which meant he was upset. But why? He was depressed that she had only talked for half an hour, but he thought it had been more than 2 hours. She assured him that it would only be 30 minutes. And then he felt ashamed that he had left her and couldn't wait. And she thought maybe she was interfering in his life too much. She hoped that he understood that these concerns were in a friendly sense. And so Hannah assured him that it wasn't his fault, because she hadn't asked him to wait for her, so everything was fine. But in her heart, she didn't admit it. Then he said sadly that she wanted him to wait. And in a minute, he transformed into a human form without warning her. Here, even the horse in the background is in shock, to say the least. And where did we stop? Exactly. Hannah screamed, how could she see it now? She could have warned. Pokins said that it was really worth seeing in person. Now, it's not a pity to die, and she's already seen it all. Hannah kept yelling for him to get dressed because everyone was looking at him. Wasn't it embarrassing to show such a beautiful body to everyone? The camp had stopped. They had finally reached the road to Mount Guamo. Now, it was time to make a plan. But he was distracted by Hannah, who was running around collecting blue acorns. But Lionel warned that they would become normal once she left this town. She was clearly disappointed, and she thought she had found something unusual to bring to her friend as a souvenir. So she threw it away. He held up an acorn and said that in this forest, the more things seem ordinary, the more complex they are. Then he threw the acorn into the clearing and said, "Open the door!" Everyone watched, waiting to see what would happen next. Hannah asked worriedly if they were gang members breaking into someone else's house, especially on their wedding day. Lionel called Chad, saying they had a problem. The mountain spirit had a wedding today, and it was a big problem for them to interfere in that territory. On the day of the mountain spirit's wedding, people with weapons are not allowed into the mountains. They can't just walk in. While the men were developing a plan, Hannah looked into the distance at the forest and wondered if it was as blue as those acorns. Disappointed because there were still so many questions. Chad complained that his products had an expiration date, so they couldn't stop selling. But Lionel came up with a new plan. He ordered Hannah to be dressed in a white robe, or at least a veil to be placed over her head, and olive oil to be prepared. Of course, it seemed very strange to her because she knows nothing about these traditions. One thing is worth knowing, it's necessary. Chad prepared as many bottles of oil as there were mercenaries, all so that they could appease the spirits. Lionel took a lock of his hair and cut it off. It was part of a sacred rite. This was the offering to the chief spirit. This thing was very valuable in such a case. He would throw the hair into the oil. This oil was very expensive because it had incredible power. It healed all wounds. And nowhere else can you find the same thing, because there are no more magical animals on Earth than could make such a healing oil. Hannah asked what would happen if she drank it, and he replied that it would not only heal all wounds, but it would also cure all diseases in your body. They prepared each bottle specifically so that the spirits would be satisfied and not pay attention to the people's weapons. This clearly interested Chen, a magical thing and also able to cure all diseases. In the mercenary world, it would be worth thousands. Lionel noticed his curiosity and asked what he was fishing for. It wasn't meant for humans if he was suddenly curious. The gift to the holy spirits was already ready. Now it was Hannah's turn. It was time to dress appropriately for the holiday. The girl came out in a white veil. It was all very unexpected for her, and she still didn't understand what his plan was. She noted that it was a veil for the brides, which they were planning to do now. He looked her straight in the eye and confirmed that it was for the bride. He took her hand and said that from now on, she was his bride. Chen was happy why they didn't have a real wedding. Lionel started laughing and told Hannah to break one of the bottles because Chen wasn't going with them anymore. He was talking too much. When the Guamo Mountains were completely different, now all noise, alcohol, jokes, even killing insects. All of this is forbidden, or you will be punished. He ordered everyone to remain silent if they wanted to live. So Chen asked what would happen if they broke the rule. Lionel turned to him and looked him straight in the soul with a cold gaze, saying that everyone would die. Chen, without thinking for a long time, warned everyone about this rule. Hannah seemed speechless from what she heard, not least because it scared her. She came up to apologize to him. This is news, he thought. That could have happened already. The girl asked if they couldn't find out that it was a lie and that they weren't a couple. But she wasn't very good at lying anyway. He assured them that they might immediately suspect something, but it would be polite to walk away and talk less. He looked at Hannah's frightened face and assured her that everything would be fine. But to calm her down a little, he switched her attention to something else. He hugged her below the waist and pulled her closer to his body. The gesture excited her. The man said that if she wanted to become his bride, then she should at least pretend that she loved him. She asked how she could do it. He advised her to just stay calm and everything would work out, and they would get through the danger together. The girl asked why she should become his bride if he could choose any other girl for this role. I think there can be no better answer than a kiss on the forehead. It truly described all his feelings for her and gave him confidence that everything was okay. He added that he didn't want anyone else but her. So let her just stay calm. She stood silently and continued to look at him, and he touched her face again and lowered his head closer to her. And then he lowered himself even lower and kissed her neck. She didn't understand what was happening at all. She couldn't believe he had just kissed her. She looked down, considering how to react. He lowered his head to her again and touched her forehead with his head. But he warned her that he wouldn't kiss her again. She was clearly in shock. He reassured her that he was simply marking his territory so that the spirits would smell him on her and not think of offending her. For some reason, not everyone understood what had happened and looked at her in silence. And how after everything they lied, that there were no feelings between them and they were just friends. Lionel broke the silence by saying that it was time for them to set off on their journey, little by little, because it would soon be dark. They set off on their journey. Chen had the hardest time. He couldn't keep quiet and talked non-stop. And then they ordered him to die otherwise. While Chen was suffering, Lionel was nauseous and yawned the whole way. Hannah didn't understand how he could break the rules when he said it was strictly for everyone. In addition, he started talking about how bored he was with walking through this forest without any adventures. The girl was completely speechless from his antics. He reassured her by assuring her that these were rules for people, and they were not ordinary people. And besides, they were husband and wife, so they could do it. Although you need to walk quietly in the forest so as not to scare the local animals, especially when they suffer from people. He took the flower that the deer brought him and presented it to the girl, telling her about the local nature. The man put a flower in her hair so that the girl would worry less and distract her from thoughts of danger. She was truly distracted, hearing about how things had changed since the other sacred beings had died. He also told how sacred animals are born. Only those who have the right are called intelligent animals. They must be born in a sacred place, and from the womb of their mother, they did not eat unclean food or do anything wrong. And even after that, they are no different from any other regular tiger. And if he continues to follow the right path, to value justice for several lifetimes in a row. So, by falling asleep in the city of his last birth, he will eventually be able to become intelligent. After all, if he is reborn intelligent, he will be able to take the power of God and become a holy being. Having reached the level of enlightenment, he will gain the power to control mountains. It all sounds complicated, but it's not. She also asked if they could have a natural birth. He looked at her and said that she was asking the same questions as the previous crazy king. He said that there is not a single person who does not know what he did 100 years ago. Although to people he was simply a former king, to the sacred animals he was the one who exterminated their entire race. And suddenly the earth shook. Something was wrong. The sacred spirits of that mountain heard them. They were all scared, especially when they saw the giant bear, and they started screaming and running away. The mercenaries took up arms and began to attack him, despite all the prohibitions the tiger had said. The men ran straight into battle against one of the spirits who was throwing stones at them. Lionel stood next to Hannah, protecting him, as stones were flying around and a fight was starting. But she heard a voice, Chen screaming because Pokins had fallen into some hole, and they couldn't save her while the bear was attacking. So as soon as she saw her body lying motionless on the ground, She decided she couldn't leave her. She ran as fast as she could, thinking she could save her because Chen was so worried. As she ran to Pokins, a stone flew over her head, a very large one. Lionel shouted for her to stop, warning her that a stone was flying at her, and he didn't have time to protect her. As soon as she looked up, she saw a stone falling directly on her head, which was getting closer. And then, waking up from her nightmares, she found herself in the middle of the forest with her clothes covered in blood. She heard a voice as Pokins told someone that she had tried to seduce Lionel, but he had held back his animal instincts, and it was strange. Hannah held her head. It still hurt a lot, it seemed, not just because of the stone hitting her head. Small, strange creatures surrounded her, happily congratulating her on waking up, telling her that a large stone had hit her. The girl asked Pokins if she was okay, but she told Hannah to watch her back because she had a hole in the back of her head. Hearing that she was injured, the girl was scared because she didn't feel any pain. How could this be possible? One of the spirits approached her and told her that he had given her some olive oil that her fiancé had given them. That is why she was cured. She was more interested in where she was now, and where Lionel was, what kind of place this was. They told Hannah that the tiger was angry. It had been a century since they had seen him so angry. They assured that this is a huge problem for them. They are now in a difficult situation because of what happened. Hannah asked why they were here with her. They replied that it was because she was hosting their wedding for them. And they wanted to tell something else, but stopped each other. They had their own secrets. But Hannah said that it was all the bear's fault. This made them very angry, because these people are to blame for coming to their territory during a wedding. So whose fault is it? The mountain spirits suddenly disappeared, and in their place appeared a fox with 4 tails. Such a girl had certainly never been seen before. He stood before them and said that now he saw that Hannah was indeed very inquisitive and intelligent. As soon as Pokins saw the fox, she seemed to fall in love with this animal, grabbing it in her arms and hugging it all over. The fox was angry, because since when did people stop being afraid of mountain spirits? And Hannah asked if the fox knew if Lionel was looking for her. He replied that yes, he was looking for her. She asked him to send them back to the boys, but he refused. He climbed onto a large mushroom and said that he thought she was smarter. There should be order in the world, he believed. So he started asking about her family and where she came from. But she was hiding something, and he knew it. And he also admitted that he caught them both for his own safety. So he can't just let them go. It would endanger his life. And all because Lionel promised to kill the fox. And as a fox, he had to defeat the sacred animal. That's why he ran into this forest to save himself. That is, he took them hostage. And if she is dear to him, then let him come up with a way to restrain the tiger from killing the fox. So again, what she doesn't like is getting in between someone to save them. She played dumb and pretended not to understand what he was talking about. He asked her to call the tiger so that they could talk alone, but so that the fox would remain alive. Although he considered her an ordinary, pitiful person, he knew that she was worthy of more than just sympathizing with him. Hannah agreed that she was pathetic, and therefore could not help. And he was wrong, because her job was to plow the land, eat bread, and brew alcohol. The fox looked at her and truly saw the girl who, although she felt sorry for herself, was capable of more. She simply hid this within herself. Hannah asked the fox if he had sent the bear to them, specifically to ruin the spirit's wedding. And he agreed because he didn't want that party. He assured that it was not easy for an intelligent animal to become a saint, and therefore he did not understand why Lionel was so angry over some girl. He reached such a level of enlightenment that he surpassed all other saints, which is why he was called God. And here he was, already very worried about her relationship with the tiger, because he knew Lionel well, and knew that he had changed a lot because of her. She assured him that there was no relationship between them, even though he knew she was lying. He could smell the strong scent of a tiger from her, and besides, the fox was a mountain spirit that protected love, and he could feel everything. The spirit understood why she said that. She didn't seem so stupid as to expect him to start dating a human. So he asked if it was because of the longevity of life. People don't live as long as gods. She lied that this was so, but the fox caught her in a lie and said that he felt everything, so it was not worth talking to him like that. The fox couldn't talk to Hannah for long because he was very interested in Pokins, who had already taken him in her arms. She couldn't get enough of the cute fox. He was cuter than kittens to her. Even though he reminded her that he was a spirit and not a toy, it didn't seem to work. Hannah told the fox that if he sent them back to Lionel, he wouldn't harm him, she was sure. Pokins listened to their conversation without understanding anything, because she was more interested in the fox's fur coat. The fox told her that he planned to quietly kidnap them, but everything changed when he pierced the back of her head, and now the tiger will not forgive him for this. And Pokins said that the wound was big. She thought she would die. The fox warned that now everything is not so simple, because that tiger occupies the highest position among all, and possesses powerful strength. And this means that when he kidnapped the tiger's bride, he challenged his authority, and now the bald man will not be. And he even said that Lionel demolished 2 mountains of Guamo that were 1,600 hectares. But a tiger has the power of a god, so nothing is impossible for him when he is angry. She found it funny that supposedly holy beings were arguing among themselves like little children and couldn't talk. The fox said one phrase, that where God came, there would be no more life. She could not have imagined that things would be so bad. Pokin said that there was nothing to think about and everything was clear. Lionel was evil and had no children. Everyone would burn. And since she liked Lionel, her disappearance brought his wrath upon them all. Hannah suggested that Pokins go to his place and sleep with him if it would make her feel better. It wasn't really Hannah's fault that they attacked her, but Pokins didn't think so, and the fox remained silent. Pokins stood up and said that she was right about one thing. It was time for her to finally do something to bring them home. Now, only she could talk to Lionel, because hostages could die at any moment. But the hostage here was a fox. She hated being responsible for another person's death. Since childhood, people had dictated to her how she should live and what she should do. Pokins was angry to hear that Hannah wasn't going to solve their problem just because it wasn't her fault. After listening to the conversation all evening, Pokins was already angry, and she didn't believe how anyone could survive such a blow. She asked if Hannah was really human. Where did she get these questions from? Is Hannah's plan starting to fail somewhere? So she confidently replied that yes, she was human. A very ordinary human, probably. Pokins started to draw her sword, threatening Hannah to finally start doing something. She ordered the girl to promise the fox that she would be able to protect him, and he would let them go. Otherwise, she won't let Hannah go until she follows the order, because Pokins will choose any option to keep her ass alive. Hannah smiled and said that now she understood why Lionel warned her to be careful with Pokins. He did understand people. The girl got to her feet and said that then she had no choice but to call the tiger. She used the relic to summon him, said words in which she begged Lionel to come to her, and that's exactly what happened. A bright light that blinded them all went straight from nowhere to her hand. And then he appeared and his yellow, predatory eyes. She covered her face from the bright light, but was incredibly happy to see her beloved cat. He stood in front of her, all excited, because he had been looking for her all this time without stopping, and believed that everything would be fine. And the two of them were lying by the tree on the side, and watching everything that was happening. It seemed they were preparing for their sentence. Hannah took Lionel's hand, and they looked intently into each other's eyes. They were so bored. She told him that she had heard that he had destroyed 2 mountains because of his hatred and desire for revenge. And he reminded her that she was risking her life. And he really believed that she could have died. And he also saw her head, where there was a large wound. When she saw his eyes, she realized that he was not joking. They were waiting for her to finally remember them and ask him to have mercy on them. He asked why she ran then. She could have just asked him to save her, and he would have helped right away. But it had gone too far. She thanked him for his concern and said that she would like to do everything herself, so she refused to ask him for help. The girl was very excited and replied that she could not always count on his help. One day, she would be left alone. In reality, she didn't want to feel indebted to him. If it weren't for those thoughts, maybe things wouldn't have gotten this far. He had no idea what her life was like or what she had been through, so he couldn't tell her what to do. He told her that he really hoped that she would start to trust and rely on him. He promised to always protect her. Lionel put his hand on her head to heal her wounds and said that he was very worried about her, which is why he was talking to her like that. And he also thanked her for not being stubborn to the end and still calling him for help. She looked down and made a sad face and thanked him once again for coming to her aid. Just as Pokins wanted to remind herself and ruin their atmosphere, Lionel sent her to Chen's camp with a wave of his hand. Now it was Tammy's turn. They had something to talk about. The fox was shaking with fear and anticipation of what would happen next. So he asked Hannah to go to the others. He could have sent her away with a wave of his hand, but she had something to say. Before her disappearance, she asked not to offend Tammy. She really wanted him to stay alive. He was interested in her words, because after everything that had happened, she begged him not to kill her abuser. Lionel praised her for her kindness and nobility. So on behalf of the Master of the Mountains, he promised her that he would not kill Tammy. This calmed her down, so he said goodbye and said they would meet in half an hour. She thanked him for listening to her and said she would wait for him at the camp. Once among her own, she saw the mercenaries. They were okay and alive. Chen was looking after Pokins because he was very worried, and she sat on a wooden box and waited for Lionel to return. There was broken merchandise all around, the aftermath of chaos, but she was too calm despite it all. She thought of herself as so handsome, strong, and rich, and also had close relationships with influential elves. He is the only holy being on Earth. In the form of a tiger, he protects his own. While she is a poor orphan from the village and not very beautiful, he approaches her without any hesitation. He never asked about anything too personal, and if she pointed out any of his flaws or traits, he immediately apologized. He never tries to put himself in the best light. And even when she almost died, he was so absorbed in the atmosphere that he couldn't stop looking at her. He cared for her in a way that her own parents could not and would not. She would be lost in her own thoughts. But she heard Lionel's voice calling her. He came back, and really quickly. The man approached her and asked if she missed him yet. She thought he wouldn't be around much longer, but only 15 minutes had passed and she was blushing in his presence. Now she really needs to admit it. She likes Lionel, and has he really smelled the scent of love? I hope not yet. Since the spirits apologized to him, they resolved everything very peacefully, and a carriage pulled by a fox also appeared, so the transportation problem was solved. He also returned the lost luggage and received monetary compensation, which he shared with Chad. Also, Pokins and Chen began to sort out their relationship. He asked her to be more careful and not leave him anymore. They knew that Chen loved Pokins, but they had a really complicated relationship and no one would help them. Hannah said that if Chen likes Pokins, then why doesn't he just confess to her and propose? Lionel blushed and said yes. Really why? It's so easy and she'll definitely agree. Right, Hannah? Pokins seems to love Chen too. She just doesn't understand it in a different way. And if she didn't, she wouldn't have followed him here. Hannah still had a question for Lionel. She was curious about what he did with Tammy, hoping that he was alive. The tiger, of course, kept his promise and did not offend the fox, even though he wanted to after everything the fox had done. But he didn't understand how she forgave Tammy, and even more so Pokins, after she betrayed her. So he found out too and wanted to take revenge. But Hannah forbade it. She was too kind to others. He looked at her and said that she really didn't look like a human being. She was too good for this world. Since she had nothing to say to him, she simply smiled sweetly, wanting to change the subject. It was time for them to say goodbye to the mercenaries and continue on their way. After all, they still had a long way to go to the elf castle. But Chen still couldn't say goodbye. He thanked Hannah for a long time for saving his beloved and asked her to forgive him for her aggression. Deep down, he knew that she was very kind. She assured him that anyone in her place would have done the same. But he leaned over to her and whispered quietly that he really wouldn't have done that. Lionel put his hand on Chen's shoulder and suggested telling this story to his descendants, and also warning them not to approach him from behind. This made Hannah very happy. She liked them all, although it was a pity to say goodbye to them. So they parted ways and resumed their journey, coming to another city to buy food and rest. They talked sweetly about everything that had happened and agreed that they would miss Chen and the other boys. And he almost forgot that he had to give her something. It was a magical artifact from the fox Tammy, a bead that would help her get where she wanted to go. Lionel continued to look at her and was once again glad that she was his companion on this journey. He did not regret it at all. Then their sweet conversation was interrupted by a pretty blonde, who wanted to know if the cat was free for dinner tonight. Another cute girl came up behind her and asked him to have dinner with her today. And then another one asking if he was free to meet for a walk today. Wow, and they're all blondes. And he said it was a coincidence, but he still owes her something. He made cute tiger ears and apologized to her because it was all in the past, honestly. While she was worried about shopping, now he owes her new clothes, and she has already found something nice to try on. It became even more unexpected when she asked him why he hadn't gotten married yet. He said that there are no saints, and people don't live long. So he hasn't found the one, and he doesn't want to be disappointed in love. So if Hannah asks such personal questions, does it mean something more? He asked in response. What about her relationship? Why isn't she married and doesn't have a boyfriend? At first, she didn't even have anything to say. She couldn't admit everything. So she replied that she didn't know any guy from the village who would meet her expectations. She said she had really high standards, and to tell the truth, her tastes had changed. Now she likes blondes too, probably even more than before. It seems he even stopped breathing after hearing what he said. And she took her clothes and went to change. He grabbed his head, thinking about everything he had heard and whether it was a dream. What if he was just fantasizing? And no, this is not a dream. He realized that this was not fair. She was manipulating his feelings. Now he would definitely be behind her. So he leaned closer and asked if she would suddenly burst. She stared at him, as if he was really worried or something on his face. And she was just thinking about it. She said he tries too hard to get people to like him, and he's starting to act like a real person. The longer he lived with people, the more he felt the need for understanding from others. At first, he was very different from a god, but now he seems to have merged into their collective. But he knew that he was different from people and would never become one of them. And he might have wanted to live his normal life. She felt sorry for him. She saw how upset he was, but she wondered if she could do something. He always just wanted people to be honest with him and tell him when they weren't comfortable, which is why he became a mercenary. And all because those shitheads are terrifyingly straightforward. And if you make them nervous, they'll say it. You'll even feel it. But to be honest, I wouldn't say it was a problem for Hannah when she found out he was different. She asked how many years it took him to turn into a human. About 500 years, he replied. And since tigers don't live in packs, it takes a very long time to meet a good person. If he had only met someone like her sooner, he might have become more humane long ago. She was angry that he was joking, but there's a grain of truth in every joke, isn't there? And in the end, he said he would take care of her, because she had dropped everything and followed him without even knowing him. Moreover, it was not difficult for him, and he even liked taking care of her. She silently watched him, remembering certain moments from their lives. And he also remembered that the last time he was cold to her for no reason, she didn't take offense and treated him kindly. Usually he ends his relationships immediately, but this one was different, something special. That's why he told her that she was an amazing girl whom he had never met in his entire life, and he had lived a long time. He noticed that she understood his whims and forgave his enemies, so he gave her another chance. After all, as Hannah says, everyone makes mistakes, and they need to be understood, which is why he wants to smile at other people more. Of course, everyone can make mistakes, said Hannah, but she warned that it's not always worth forgiving, and it's better to trust your heart. What a pity that Hannah wasn't born earlier and he didn't meet her. And he was inspired and said that he was sorry because he had not known about such kindness and forgiveness before, so perhaps everything could have turned out differently. She listened to him carefully and asked if he really wanted her to forgive Tammy. He smiled because she recognized his desire. He had really wanted it in the first place. He didn't insist. He just wanted to see her decision. Forgiveness is a personal freedom, and yet she showed mercy to him. She assured him that she just didn't want to make a fuss about what happened. She didn't consider it a big problem. They had to get up very early tomorrow, so they went to bed because they were already very tired. But Hannah still hadn't closed her eyes and was looking at her cat. He was sleeping soundly and purring softly, and her thoughts about him never left her, although it's difficult when everything is mutual, but both of them are silent. She thought about magical animals and whether they all looked like him. Human-like and yet miserable. The former king, if he hadn't been so cruel to them, everything would have been completely different. They were creatures who sowed, absorbing the mistakes of people just like Lionel. Then they tried to understand and accept, but only one did not accept such a fate, Lionel Milliard. He could not stand the destruction of the sacred animals, so he went against the king. The former king felt no guilt at all for killing small animals, those who accepted people with all their sins. He suffered misfortune, but he hoped that she, born of his mistakes, would live this life happily, on the land from which the gods departed so that she could be born. The only daughter of the former king, Hannah. The next morning they decided to set off again, finding themselves in a temple where the things of divine beings lay. She was excited to be in such a beautiful and sacred place with him. Lionel suggested they rest, as they had arrived sooner than planned, thanks to the shortcut they had taken through the mountains. He placed his hand on her head, stroking it, and called it fruit wine, because he loved it as much as he loved her. But he warned her that if she felt unwell, she should definitely tell him, and he would take care of her. She looked at him awkwardly and couldn't understand why he was so kind to her, even despite her complex character. Hannah was happy and reminded him that they had agreed to drink a bottle of wine, or at least just spend time together. She looked at him, noticing that he was very quiet, and asked, "What about personal time?" He didn't quite understand her question and even started to worry about why she suddenly wanted to be alone. They held hands but agreed to spend time separately and meet in the evening, and he asked her to call him if she needed help. She agreed. Walking through the city, Hannah felt uneasy, as if someone was following her. She decided it was time to change direction and went in the other direction to a quieter place. She felt even then that something was wrong and that he had been pursuing her for a long time, but he was just from afar, and now he was getting closer. This man pursued her until the very end, until she stopped and asked who he was. The man in the hood had a rather familiar face. She asked who he was and why he was chasing her. Then he took off his hood and asked her what she was doing in this city where she definitely shouldn't be. And then she remembered who he was and couldn't understand why he kept stalking her since the mercenary bar. He reminded her again that this was not the city she was supposed to be in, and that she was too far from home right now. Not understanding why she had to explain anything to him, she asked him the same thing. What was he doing here? He reminded her of the agreement with Minister Ezekiel, and Hannah asked why he still pretended like they didn't know each other. After all, years ago, when she still lived in the castle, all the elves hated her. She tried to avoid them by hiding in the trees and in the room, but all the elves despised her, calling her a vile creature. They could not prevent her birth, and among all those who hated her, there was one who did it the most. When she was playing with a doll sitting in a tree, a stone suddenly fell from her hands and flew straight at a person passing under a tree. She apologized, but he was hurt and very angry. She apologized again and asked if he was okay. He calmly replied that yes, everything was fine, until he saw the one who threw the stone at him, the one he had humiliated his whole life and wanted to destroy. He called her a child of dirty blood. Even though it wasn't her fault that she was born, she was just a child. She still couldn't forget that expression on his face. The look on his face seemed to be staring at a corpse, and now this view is the same. He considered her worthless and wanted her to die. He asked if she had revealed her identity to the holy tiger, but she assured him that he knew nothing. He couldn't let her accompany the last saint on earth because he thought she wanted to destroy him. She was evil. He was trying to convince her to give up her magical powers, and then he would accompany Lionel. But she didn't agree with that fool. He was angry when he heard that she had told him to be polite before demanding anything from her. She asked him to be a polite boy and ask her like a dog and to bark at her feet. He warned her that Azekale would take care of her if she didn't disappear herself, and if not, then he would do it himself. He attacked the girl and began to strangle her. He wanted her dead and did not want to stop. He continued to choke her and asked where her strength and pride had gone now. But there would be consequences for such an act. So he raised his hands and let her go, letting her breathe, and warned her that this was the last warning. She could barely stand, trying to catch a few breaths of air. She knew she wouldn't forgive him that easily, but she couldn't leave Lionel either. She had to figure something out. A heavy downpour began. The elf put on his hood and started walking away from her while no one saw them. But at the end, he stopped and, turning his head, reminded her that she shouldn't test his patience because he would come back for her. She was holding her throat because she was still having trouble breathing and everything hurt. But she had to go back. Lionel was worried. She walked through the city without an umbrella, completely soaked. People looked back at her when they saw the bruises on her neck. She didn't know where to go and was already overwhelmed by everything that had happened. So she stood in the middle of the street. Lionel was just passing by when he saw a girl getting wet in the rain, and only then did he realize it was Hannah. He quickly approached her, holding an umbrella, trying to find out what had happened, but she remained silent. He watched her silently, hugging her to warm her up a little. They were walking to the hotel, but she wasn't talking, and her cheeks were red. It seemed like she had a fever again. He continued walking without asking anything else so as not to disturb her. He just wanted her to go to bed as soon as possible. Hannah looked at him and knew she couldn't lose him to some crazy elf. He brought her to the hotel and put her in bed to rest. She really had a fever from getting wet. Lionel was very worried why she didn't call him for help. Did she really have something to hide? And those strange bruises on her neck, like someone had strangled her. He could smell the elf, exactly the same as the elf he had seen in the bar earlier. He should have clarified everything and talked to her first, right after she recovered. He saw that she had come to her senses and opened her eyes. When she saw him, she was very happy and called his name. He almost cried when he saw that she had woken up and could speak, because her condition was really serious. She apologized for getting into trouble again, and he asked her to listen to him and not bring herself to such a state. He wanted to find out why she didn't call him when it happened, asking if she had stopped trusting him. Of course not, she assured him. It was just her problem and she was very wrong, but she had to solve it all herself. She really hoped he would understand and not get involved in her story. She wanted to figure it out herself. He asked her not to scare him like that anymore and not to disappear for so long. Otherwise, he would never let her go at all. She asked if he was very worried, to which he simply lowered his head. She laughed when he said she was jealous of a puppy caught in the rain. He took her hand and kissed it, saying how glad he was that she was feeling better, but that she shouldn't disappear in the future, because he was worried. She woke up and realized that it was just a dream. Everything wasn't real, and the fact that he came to her also seems like a delusion, where he asked her not to avoid him. She was just thinking about how long it had been since she had seen him, and it had already been a few days since she had fallen ill. He just brought her food and left. And that was when she was asleep and couldn't see. She didn't even know what to say to him when they met. She was uncomfortable in front of him. He was sitting at the window when he heard Hannah's voice, as the horse said that she wanted the rain to stop. He spoke to her first, saying that he lived in the next room. She was even happy to learn that he had been by her side all this time. She asked him why he wasn't sleeping and what he was doing. He replied that he was awake because he was worried that his companions had hurt him. She told him that she was really surprised that he didn't ask her about the details of that day. He replied that he could see that she didn't want to talk about it, so he wouldn't force her to. She finally smiled, praising him for being a very clever tiger. He said he understood and knew she would have called him, but it seemed she had other personal reasons. He noticed that Hannah did not change even in the face of all circumstances, good or bad. She sat outside his window and he couldn't see her face at all, only listening to her voice. It didn't seem to him then that he was a saint, but rather the most ordinary person. He asked her how far she could go if his closeness was too much of a burden for him. Seeing her hand out, catching the raindrops, he asked where the boundaries were at which she would be comfortable with him. He believed he could forcefully get close to her and enter her boundaries, ruining that relationship. She said that if she ever develops feelings for him, she also hopes that they won't be a burden for him. He blushed and said that he really wanted a relationship with her. In thousands of years, he had not felt what he felt with her in a few weeks. He asked Hannah to promise him just one thing, that she wouldn't get hurt like that again, because it hurt him too. She agreed and said she would like to see him. She really wanted to run up to him and hug him, and he wanted to tell her a lot, but it was too late for that. So she wished him sweet dreams, and he thought about the day he would find that elf for revenge. He felt that she was too closely connected to the elves now, but he was sure that if anything happened between them, he would find out. And he was more than sure that Azekale was connected to this, and that's why they would need to meet. At the same time, Azekale was also thinking about them, having heard new gossip about the girl and the tiger going to the elves together. He said that so much time had passed, and he had been waiting for that meeting for a very long time. Hannah woke up feeling very refreshed and sleepy. She was happy to start the day by continuing her journey. Lionel came up behind her and asked if she had slept well, because she looked much better and healthier. She watched and didn't understand why, after everything, he decided to act as usual. He invited her to breakfast because he ordered it in advance, and we all know they like to eat deliciously and a lot. He offered her his hand and asked if he could hold her hand, out of friendship, of course, to go to breakfast. She was worried, but he started laughing and said that it was just a simple check to see if he was imposing his feelings on her. She blushed. That's why he realized that it wasn't just because of her expression. Hannah got very angry and started running around saying that it was time for breakfast. It made him so happy. She was the same as always. She was angry because how could his behavior change so much overnight? He's different. In the morning, Lionel was very polite, asking if she needed anything and maybe she wanted to eat something, drink something, or go for a walk. He came up to her again and happily said that she looked completely healthy now, and he was sincerely happy for her. Hannah, he said. He wanted so badly to say something more to her, radiating all the beauty of his body. She looked at him angrily and asked him not to look at her like that. It was annoying, and he continued to do so, pretending not to understand what she was talking about. After all, he was the same as always. She got even more annoyed and closed her eyes so as not to see the ray of beauty emanating from him. He was really cute. She was annoyed that he was using his charms on her because he must have sensed that she was interested in him too. Yes, she admitted that they were in love with each other, but it was only in her thoughts. But how could she tell him in reality? She was nervous, covering her face so she wouldn't see him, and he stood next to her with his cute little face and asked what happened to her. He even started to worry when he saw that her face was as red as a tomato, wondering if she had gotten sick again. Looking at how cute she was, he wanted to touch her, so he couldn't help himself and kissed her on the forehead. Hannah, he said softly, we'll have the party on the riverbank, but will we have 1 or 2 children? Looking her straight in the eyes, he expected her to say yes and be with him for the rest of her life. But of course, it was just a fantasy. And did you believe it? In reality, the two of them were too embarrassed to talk openly. Then he was distracted by a woman who really wanted to give him a gift in the form of a bottle of alcohol. This is a snake tincture that would help him with his nighttime affairs, if he understands what it's about. Here even he was shocked by what he heard, especially when a crowd of people decided to congratulate him together and bring gifts. And of course, she decided to leave him alone with the fans while he screamed what a traitor she was. But don't worry, everything is fine and he's alive again. But he's angry that she left him alone with people. And she reminded him that it's his own fault that he's famous. He agreed, saying that this was why he had seduced her with his cute face.